before being directed onto the print where it collides with the other half of the laser, Fig 14. This creates a waveform interference pattern which contains the waveformed information of whatever is being photographed, Fig 15 overleaf. The process can be likened to dropping pebbles in a pond. Waves generated by each one spread out across the water to collide with the others, and create a wave representation of where the stones fell, and at what speed, weight, and distance. A waveform interference pattern of a hologram is akin to the waveform information in the field, which the V-senses decode into electrical signals to be decoded by the brain into a holographic illusory physical reality. In the same way, when a laser, think human Inchen, is directed at the waveform interference pattern, a three-dimensional version of the subject is projected into apparently solid reality, Fig 16. An amazing trait of holograms reveals more paranormal mysteries. Information of the whole hologram is encoded in waveform in every part of the interference pattern by the way they are created. This means that every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. Cut the interference wave pattern into 4, and you won't get 4 parts of the image. You get quarter-sized versions of the whole image. The body is a hologram, and the same applies. Here we have the basis of acupuncture, reflexology, and other forms of healing, which identify representations of the whole body in all of the parts, hands, feet, ears, everywhere. Skilled palm readers can do what they do because the information of whole body is encoded in the hand. The concept of as above, so below, comes from this. Figure 15. A waveform interference pattern that holds the information that transforms into a hologram. Figure 16. Holographic people including Elvis, holographically inserted to sing a duet with Celine Dion. The question will be asked of why, if solidity is illusory, we can't just walk through walls and each other. The resistance is not solid against solid. It is electromagnetic eld against electromagnetic eld, and we decode this into the experience of solid against solid. We should also not underestimate the power of belief to dictate reality. What you believe is impossible will be. Your belief impacts on your decoding processes, and they won't decode what you think is impossible. What we believe we perceive, and what we perceive we experience. Can't DOS and impossibles are like a rewall in a computer system that won't put on the screen what the rewall blocks. How vital that is to understanding how human experience has been hacked. I explain in the answer, everything you need to know but have never been told, and other books a long list of mysteries and paranormal phenomena that are not mysterious and perfectly normal once you realize what reality is and how it works. Ghosts can be seen to pass through solid walls because the walls are not solid, and the ghost is a discarnate entity operating on a frequency so different to that of the wall that it's like 2 radio stations sharing the same space while never interfering with each other. I have seen ghosts do this myself. The apartness of people and objects is also an illusion. Everything is connected by the field like all sea life is connected by the sea. It's just that within the limits of our visual reality, we only see holographic information, and not the eld of information that connects everything, and from which the holographic world is made manifest. If you can only see holographic objects, and not the eld that connects them, they will appear to you as unconnected to each other, in the same way that we see the computer while not seeing the Wi-Fi. What you don't know can hurt you, okay? We return to those 2 worlds of human society, and the cult with its global network of interconnecting secret societies and satanic groups, which manipulate through governments, corporations, media, religions, etc. The fundamental difference between them is knowledge. The idea has been to keep humanity ignorant of the plan for its total enslavement, underpinned by a crucial ignorance of reality, who we are, and where we are, and how we interact with it. Human should be the interaction between our expanded eternal consciousness and the V-sense body experience. We are meant to be in this world in terms of the V-senses, but not of this world, in relation to our greater consciousness and perspective. In that state, we experience the small picture of the V-senses within the wider context of the big picture of awareness beyond the V-senses. Put another way, the V-senses see the dots and expanded awareness, connects them into pictures and patterns that give context to the apparently random and unconnected. Without the context of expanded awareness, the V-senses see only apartness and randomness with apparently no meaning. The cult and its other dimensional controllers seek to intervene in the frequency realm, where V-sense reality is supposed to connect with expanded reality, and to keep the 2 apart. More on this in the Now chapter. When that happens, V-sense, mental and emotional processes, are no longer influenced by expanded awareness, or the true I, and instead are driven by the isolated perceptions of the body's decoding systems. They are in the world and of it. Here we have the human plight, and why humanity with its potential for innate awareness can be so easily manipulatable and descend into such extremes of stupidity. Once the cult isolates V-sense mind from expanded awareness, it can then program the mind with perceptions and beliefs by controlling information that the mind receives through the education system of the formative years, and the media perceptual bombardment and censorship of an entire lifetime. Limit perception and a sense of the possible through limiting knowledge, by limiting and skewing information, while censoring and discrediting that which could set people free. As the title of another of my books says, "And the truth shall set you free." For this reason, the last thing the cult wants in circulation is the truth about anything, especially the reality of the eternal I, and that's why it is desperate to control information. The cult knows that information becomes perception, which becomes behavior, which, collectively, becomes human society. Cult-controlled and funded mainstream science denies the existence of an eternal I, and seeks to dismiss and trash all evidence to the contrary. Cult-controlled mainstream religion has a version of God that is little more than a system of control and dictatorship that employs threats of damnation in an airlife to control perceptions and behavior in the here and now through fear and guilt. Neither is true, and it's the neither that the cult wishes to suppress. This neither is that everything is an expression, a point of intention, within an innate state of consciousness, which is the real meaning of the term God. Perceptual obsession with the physical body and V-senses means that God becomes personated as a bearded bloke seeing among the clouds, or a raging bully who loves us if we do what he wants, and condemns us to the res of hell if we don't. These are no more than a spiritual fairy tales to control and dictate events and behavior through fear of this God, which has bizarrely made God-fearing in religious circles a state to be desired. I would suggest that fearing anything is not to be encouraged and celebrated, but rather deleted. You can see why God-fearing is so beneficial to the cult and its religions when they decide what God wants and what God demands, the cult demands, that everyone do. As the great American comedian Bill Hicks said, satirizing a Christian zealot, "I think what God meant to say, how much of this innate awareness, God, that we access is decided by how far we choose to expand our perceptions, self-identity, and sense of the possible. The scale of self-identity wreaks itself in the scale of awareness that we can connect with, and are nuanced by how much knowing and insight we have instead of programmed perception. You cannot expand your awareness into the infinity of possibility when you believe that you are Lyle Peter the postman or Mary in marketing, and nothing more. I'll deal with this in the concluding chapter because it's crucial to how we turn around current events. Where the cult came from. When I realized in the early 1990s there was a cult network behind global events, I asked the obvious question: when did it start? I took it back to ancient Rome and Egypt, and on to Babylon and Sumer in Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, in what we now call Iraq. The two rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates, and this region is of immense historical and other importance to the cult, as is the land called Israel, only 550 miles away by air. There's much more going with deep esoteric meaning across this whole region. It's not only about wars for oil. Priceless artifacts from Mesopotamia were stolen or destroyed ere the American and British invasion of Iraq in 2003, justified by the lies of Boy Bush and Tony Blair, their cult masters, about non-existent weapons of mass destruction. Mesopotamia was the location of Sumer, about 5400 BC to 1750 BC, and Babylon, about 2350 BC to 539 BC. Sabaeans may have become immensely influential in the cult in modern times, but they are part of a network that goes back into the mists of history. Sumer is said by historians to be the cradle of civilization. I disagree. I say it was the restart of what we call human civilization, ere cataclysmic events, symbolized in part as the Great Flood destroyed the world that existed before. These fantastic upheavals that I have been describing in detail in the books since the early 1990s appear in accounts and legends of ancient cultures across the world, and they are supported by geological and biological evidence. Stone tablets found in Iraq detailing the Sumer period say the cataclysms were caused by non-human gods they call the Anunnaki. These are described in terms of extraterrestrial visitations, in which knowledge supplied by the Anunnaki is said to have been the source of at least one of the world's oldest writing systems and developments in astronomy, mathematics, and architecture that were way ahead of their time. I have covered this subject at length in The Biggest Secret and Children of the Matrix, and the same basic Anunnaki story can be found in Zulu accounts in South Africa, where the late and very great Zulu high shaman Credo Mutwa told me that the Sumerian Anunnaki were known by Zulus as the Chitori, or Children of the Serpent. See my 6-hour video interview with Credo on this subject, entitled The Reptilian Agenda, recorded at his then home near Johannesburg in 1999, which you can watch on the iconic media platform. The cult emerged out of Sumer, Babylon and Egypt, and elsewhere, and established the Roman Empire before expanding with the Romans into northern Europe, from where many empires were savagely imposed in the form of cult-controlled societies all over the world. Mass death and destruction was their calling card. The cult established its center of operations in Europe, and European empires were cult empires which allowed it to expand into a global force. Spanish and Portuguese colonialists headed for Central and South America, while the British and French targeted North America. Africa was colonized by Britain, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Germany. Some, like Britain and France, moved in on the Middle East. The British Empire was by far the biggest for a simple reason. By now, Britain was the headquarters of the cult, from which it expanded to form Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. The sun never set on the British Empire, such was the scale of its occupation. London remains a global center for the cult, along with Rome and the Vatican, although others have emerged in Israel and China. It is no accident that the virus is alleged to have come out of China, while Italy was chosen as the means to terrify the Western population into compliance with COVID fascism. Nor that Israel has led the world in COVID fascism and mass vaccination. You would think that I would mention the United States here, but while it has been an important means of imposing the cults, well, it is less significant than would appear, and is currently in the process of having what power it does have deleted. The cult in Europe has mostly loaded the guns for the US to re. America has been controlled from Europe from the start through cult operatives in Britain and Europe. The American Revolution was an illusion to make it appear that America was governing itself, while very different forces were pulling the strings in the form of cult families, such as the Rothschilds, through the Rockefellers and other subordinates. The Rockefellers are extremely close to Bill Gates, and established both scalpel and drug medicine and the World Health Organization. They play a major role in the development and circulation of vaccines through the Rockefeller Foundation, on which Bill Gates said his foundation is based. Why wouldn't this be the case when the Rockefellers and Gates are on the same team? Cult infiltration of human society goes way back into what we call history, and has been constantly expanding and centralizing power, with the goal of establishing a global structure to dictate everything. Look how this has been advanced in great leaps with the COVID hoax. The non-human dimension I researched and observed the comings and goings of cult operatives through the centuries, and even thousands of years as they were born, worked to promote the agenda within the secret society and satanic networks, and then died for others to replace them. Clearly, there had to be a coordinating force that spanned this entire period, while operatives who would not have seen the end goal in their lifetimes came and went, advancing the plan over millennia. I went in search of that coordinating force, with the usual support from the extraordinary synchronicity of my life, which has been an almost daily experience since 1990. I saw common themes in religious texts and ancient cultures about a non-human force manipulating human society from the hidden. Christianity calls this force Satan, the devil, and demons. Islam refers to the jinn or jinn. Zulus have their Chitori, spelt in other ways in different parts of Africa. And the Gnostic people in Egypt in the period around and before 400 AD referred to this phenomena as the archons, a word meaning rulers in Greek. Central American cultures speak of the predators among other names, and the same theme is everywhere. I will use archons as a collective name for all of them. When you see how their nature and behavior is described, all these different sources are clearly talking about the same force. Gnostics describe the archons in terms of luminous re, while Islam relates the jinn to smokeless re. Some refer to beings in form that could occasionally be seen, but the most common of common theme is that they operate from unseen realms, which means almost all existence to the visual processes of humans. I had concluded that this was indeed the foundation of human control, and that the cult was operating within the human frequency band on behalf of this hidden force, when I came across the writings of Gnostics, which supported my conclusions in the most extraordinary way. A sealed earthen jar was found in 1945 near the town of Nag Hammadi, about 75 to 80 miles north of Luxor, on the banks of the River Nile in Egypt. Inside was a treasure trove of manuscripts and texts by the Gnostic people some 1,600 years earlier. They included 13 leather-bound papyrus codices, manuscripts, and more than 50 texts written in Coptic Egyptian, estimated to have been hidden in the jar in the period of 400 AD, although the source of the information goes back much further. Gnostics oversaw the Great or Royal Library of Alexandria, the fantastic depository of ancient texts, detailing advanced knowledge and accounts of human history. The library was dismantled and destroyed in stages over a long period, with the death blow delivered by the cult-established Roman Church in the period around 415 AD. The Church of Rome was the Church of Babylon relocated, as I said earlier. Gnostics were not a race. They were a way of perceiving reality. Whenever they established themselves, and their information circulated, the terrorists of the Church of Rome would target them for destruction. This happened with the Great Library, and with the Gnostic Cathars, who were burned to death by the psychopaths, ere a long period of oppression, at the siege of the castle of Monsker in southern France in 1244. The Church has always been tarried of Gnostic information, which demolishes the official Christian narrative, although there is much in the Bible that supports the Gnostic view if you read it in another way. To anyone studying the texts of what became known as the Nag Hammadi Library, it is clear that great swath of Christian and biblical belief has its origin with Gnostic sources going back to Sumer. Gnostic themes have been twisted to manipulate the perceived reality of Bible believers. Biblical texts have been in the open for centuries, where they could be changed, while Gnostic documents found at Nag Hammadi were sealed away and untouched for 1,600 years. What you see is what they wrote. Use your pneuma, not your news. Gnosticism and Gnostic come from gnosis, which means knowledge, or rather secret knowledge, in the sense of spiritual awareness, knowledge about reality and life itself. The desperation of the cult's Church of Rome to destroy the Gnostics can be understood when the knowledge they were circulating was the last thing the cult wanted the population to know. 1,600 years later, the same cult is working hard to undermine and silence me for the same reason. The dynamic between knowledge and ignorance is a constant. Time appears to move on, but essential themes remain the same. We are told to use your news, a Gnostic word for head-brain intelligence. They said, however, that spiritual awakening or salvation could only be secured by expanding awareness beyond what they called news, and into pneuma or innate self. Obviously, as I read these texts, the parallels with what I have been saying since 1990 were fascinating to me. There is a universal truth that spans human history, and in that case, why wouldn't we be talking the same language 16 centuries apart? When you free yourself from the perception program of the V-senses and explore expanded realms of consciousness, you are going to connect with the same information, no matter what the perceived era within a manufactured timeline of a single and tiny range of manipulated frequency. Humans working with smart technology, or knocking rocks together in caves, is only a timeline appearing to operate within the human frequency band. Expanded awareness and the knowledge it holds have always been there, whether the era be Stone Age or Computer Age. We can only access that knowledge by opening ourselves to its frequency, which the V-Sense prison cell is designed to stop us doing. Gates, Fossey, Wee, Valence, Zuckerberg, Brin, Page, Wojcicki, Bezos, and all the others behind the COVID hoax clearly have a long wait before their range of frequency can make that connection, given that an open heart is crucial to that, as we shall see. Instead of accessing knowledge directly through expanded awareness, it is given to cult operatives by the secret society networks of the cult, where it has been passed on over thousands of years outside the public arena. Expanded realms of consciousness is where great artists, composers, and writers ND their inspiration, and where truth awaits anyone open enough to connect with it. We need to go there fast. Archon Hijack H of the Nag Hammadi texts describe the existence and manipulation of the archons, led by a chief archon they call Yaldabaoth, or the Demiurge. And this is the Christian devil, Satan, Lucifer, and his demons. Archons in biblical symbolism are the fallen ones, which are also referred to as fallen angels, ere the angels expelled from heaven, according to the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. These angels are claimed to tempt humans to sin ongoing, and you will see how accurate that symbolism is during the rest of the book. The theme of original sin is related to the fall when Adam and Eve were tempted by the serpent and fell from a state of innocence and obedience connection with God into a state of disobedience disconnection. The fall is said to have brought sin into the world and corrupted everything including human nature. Yaldabaoth, the Lord Archon, is described by Gnostics as a counterfeit spirit, the blind one, the blind god, and the foolish one. The Jewish name for Yaldabaoth in Talmudic writings is Samael, which translates as poison of God, or blindness of God. You see the parallels. Yaldabaoth in Islamic belief is the Muslim jinn devil, known as Shaitan. Shaitan is Satan, as the same themes are found all over the world in every religion and culture. The Lord God of the Old Testament is the Lord Archon of Gnostic manuscripts, and that's why he's such a bloodthirsty bastard. Satan is known by Christians as the demon of demons and Gnostics, called Yaldabaoth the Archon of Archons. Both are known as the deceiver. We are talking about the same bloke for sure, and these common themes. Using different names, storylines and symbolism tell a common tale of the human plight. Archons are referred to in Nag Hammadi documents as mind parasites, inverters, guards, gatekeepers, detainers, judges, pitiless ones, and deceivers. The COVID hoax alone is a glaring example of all these things. The biblical God is so different in the Old and New Testaments because they are not describing the same phenomenon. The vindictive, angry, hate-led God of the Old Testament, known as Yahweh, is Yaldabaoth, who is depicted in cult-dictated popular culture as the Dark Lord, Lord of Time, Lord Darth Vader, and Dormammu, the evil ruler of the Dark Dimension trying to take over the Earth Dimension in the Marvel comic movie, Doctor Strange. Yaldabaoth is both the Old Testament God and the biblical Satan. Gnostics referred to Yaldabaoth as the great architect of the universe, and the cult-controlled Freemason network calls their god the great architect of the universe, also Grand Architect. The great architect Yaldabaoth is symbolized by the cult as the all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid on the Great Seal of the United States and the dollar bill. Archon is encoded in Architect as it is in archangels and archbishops. All religions have the theme of a force for good and force for evil in some sort of spiritual war, and there is a reason for that. The theme is true. The cult and its non-human masters are quite happy for this to circulate. They present themselves as the force for good ghting evil when they are really the force of evil, absence of love. The whole foundation of cult modus operandi is inversion. They promote themselves as a force for good, and anyone challenging them in pursuit of peace, love, fairness, truth, and justice is condemned as a satanic force for evil. This has been the game planned throughout history, whether the Church of Rome, inquisitions of non-believers, or conspiracy theorists and anti-vaxxers of today. The technique is the same whatever the timeline era. Yaldabaoth is revolting true. Yaldabaoth and the Archons are said to have revolted against God, with Yaldabaoth claiming to be God, the all that is. The Old Testament God, Yaldabaoth, demanded to be worshipped as such. I am the Lord, and there is none else. There is no God beside me. Isaiah 45:5. I have quoted in other books a man who said he was the unofficial son of the late Baron Philippe de Rothschild, of the Mountain Rothschild wine-producing estates in France, who died in 1988, and he told me about the Rothschild revolt from God. The man said he was given the name Philip Eugene de Rothschild, and we shared long correspondence many years ago while he was living under another identity. He said that he was conceived through a cult incest, which, within the cult, was normal and to be admired. Philip told me about his experience ending satanic rituals with rich and famous people whom he names, and you can see them and the wider background to cult Satanism in my other book, starting with The Biggest Secret. Cult rituals are interactions with archontic gods. Philip described Baron Philippe de Rothschild as a master Satanist and hater of God, and he used the same term revolt from God, associated with Yaldabaoth, Satan, Lucifer, devil, in describing the Sabatian Rothschild dynasty. I played a key role in my family's revolt from God, he said. That role was to infiltrate in classic Sabatian style the Christian church, but eventually he escaped the mind prison to live another life. The cult has been targeting religion in a plan to make worship of the Archons the global one-world religion. Infiltration of Satanism into modern culture, especially among the young, through music videos, stage shows, and other means, is all part of this. Nag Hammadi texts describe Yaldabaoth and the Archons in their prime form as energy consciousness, and say they can take form if they choose in the same way that consciousness takes form as a human. Yaldabaoth is called formless, and represents a deeply inverted, distorted and chaotic state of consciousness, which seeks to atch to humans and turn them into a likeness of itself in an aimed at assimilation. For that to happen, it has to manipulate humans into low-frequency mental and emotional states that match its own. Archons can certainly appear in human form, and this is the origin of the psychopathic personality. The energetic distortion Gnostics called Yaldabaoth is psychopathy. When psychopathic archons take human form, that human will be a psychopath as an expression of Yaldabaoth consciousness. Cult psychopaths are archons in human form. The principle is the same as that portrayed in the 2009 Avatar movie, when the American military traveled to a seasonal Earth-like moon, called Pandora in the Alpha Centauri star system, to infiltrate a society of blue people, or Navi, by hiding within bodies that looked like the Navi. Archons posing as humans have a particular hybrid information eld, part human, part archon, the ancient demigods, which processes information in a way that manifests behavior to match their psychopathic evil, lack of empathy and compassion, and stops them being influenced by the empathy, compassion and love that a fully human information eld is capable of expressing. Cult bloodlines interbreed, be they royalty or dark suits. For this reason, and you have their obsession with incest. Interbreeding with full-blown humans would dilute the archontic energy eld that guarantees psychopathy in its representatives in the human realm. Gnostic writings say the main non-human forms that archons take are serpentine, what I have called for decades reptilian, amid unbounded ridicule from the archontically programmed, and what Gnostics describe as an unborn baby or fetus with gray skin and dark, unmoving eyes. This is an excellent representation of the ET greys of UFO folklore, which large numbers of people claim to have seen and been abducted by Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa among them. I agree with those that believe in extraterrestrial or interdimensional visitations today, and for thousands of years past. No wonder with their advanced knowledge and technological capability, they were perceived and worshipped as gods for technological and other miracles they appeared to perform. Imagine someone arriving in a culture disconnected from the modern world with a smartphone and computer. They would be seen as a god capable of miracles. The renegade mind, however, wants to know the source of everything, and not only the way that source manifests as human or non-human. In the same way that a renegade mind seeks the original source material for the COVID virus to see if what is claimed is true. The original source of archons in form is consciousness, the distorted state of consciousness, known to Gnostics as Yaldabaoth. Revolt from God is energetic disconnection. Where I am going next will make a lot of sense of religious texts and ancient legends relating to Satan, Lucifer, and the gods. Gnostic descriptions sync perfectly with the themes of my own research over the years, in how they describe a consciousness distortion seeking to impose itself on human consciousness. I've referred to the core of innate awareness in previous books as innate awareness in awareness of itself. By that, I mean a level of awareness that knows that it is all awareness and is aware of all awareness. From here comes the frequency of love in its true sense and balance, which is what love is on one level, the balance of all forces into a single whole called oneness and isness. The more we disconnect from this state of love, that many call God, the constituent parts of that oneness start to unravel and express themselves as a part and not a whole. They become individualized as intellect, mind, selfishness, hatred, envy, desire for power over others, and such like. This is not a problem in the greater scheme in that God, the all that is, can experience all these possibilities through different expressions of itself, including humans. What we as expressions of the whole experience, the all that is experiences. We are the all that is experiencing itself. As we withdraw from that state of oneness, we disconnect from its influence, and things can get very unpleasant and very stupid. Archontic consciousness is at the extreme end of that. It has so disconnected from the influence of oneness that it has become an inversion of unity and love, an inversion of everything, an inversion of life itself. Evil is appropriately live read backwards. Archontic consciousness is obsessed with death, an inversion of life, and so its manifestations in Satanism are obsessed with death. They use inverted symbols in their rituals, such as the inverted pentagram and cross. Sabbatians as archontic consciousness incarnate invert Judaism and every other religion and culture they infiltrate. They seek disunity and chaos, and they fear unity and harmony as they fear love like garlic to a vampire. As a result, the cult, archons incarnate, act with such evil, psychopathy and lack of empathy and compassion disconnected as they are from the source of love? How could Bill Gates and the rest of the archontic psychopaths do what they have to human society in the COVID era with all the death, sewering and destruction involved, and have no emotional consequence for the impact on others? Now you know. Why have Zuckerberg, Brin, Page, Wojcicki and company callously censored information warning about the dangers of the vaccine, while thousands have been dying and having severe, sometimes life-changing reactions? Now you know. Why have Tedros, Fauci, Valence and their like around the world been using case and death gears they are aware are fraudulent to justify lockdowns and all the deaths and destroyed lives that have come from that? Now you know. Why did Christian Drosten produce and promote a testing protocol that he knew couldn't test for infectious disease which led to a global human catastrophe? Now you know. The archontic mind doesn't give a shit, Fig 17. I personally think that Gates and major cult insiders are a form of AI cyborg that the archons want humans to become. Figure 17. Artist Neil Haig's version of the COVID hierarchy. Human batteries. A state of such inversion does have its consequences, however. The level of disconnection from the source of all means that you withdraw from that source of energetic sustenance and creativity. This means that you have to ND your own supply of energetic power, and it has us. When the Morpheus character in the RSD Matrix movie held up a berry, he spoke a profound truth when he said, "The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world built to keep us under control in order to change the human being into one of these." The statement was true in all respects. We do live in a technologically generated virtual reality simulation, more very shortly, and we have been manipulated to be an energy source for archontic consciousness. The Disney Pixar animated movie Monsters, Inc. in 2001 symbolized the dynamic when monsters in their world had no energy source, and they would enter the human world to terrify children in their beds, catch the child's scream, terror, low vibrational frequencies, and take that energy back to power the monster world. The lead character, you might remember, was a single giant eye, and the symbolism of the cult's all-seeing eye was obvious. Every thought and emotion is broadcast as a frequency unique to that thought and emotion. Feelings of love and joy, empathy and compassion are high, quick frequencies, while fear, depression, anxiety, sewering and hate are low, slow, dense frequencies. Which kind do you think archontic consciousness can connect with and absorb? In such a low and dense frequency state, there's no way it can connect with the energy of love and joy. Archons can only feed energy compatible with their own frequency, and they and their cult agents want to delete the human world of love and joy, and manipulate the transmission of low vibrational frequencies through low vibrational human mental and emotional states. We are their energy source. Wars are energetic banquets to the archons, a world war even more so, and think how much low-frequency mental and emotional energy has been generated from the consequences for humanity of the COVID hoax orchestrated by archons incarnate like Gates. The ancient practice of human sacrifice to the gods, continued in secret today by the cult, is based on the same principle. The gods are archontic consciousness in different forms, and the sacrifice is induced into a state of intense terror to generate the energy the archontic frequency can absorb. Incarnate archons in the ritual drink the blood which contains an adrenaline they crave, which oozes into the bloodstream when people are terrorized. Most of the sacrifices, ancient and modern, are children, and the theme of sacrificing young virgins to the gods is just code for children. They have a particular pre-puberty energy that archons want more than anything, and the energy of the young in general is their target. The California Department of Education wants students to chant the names of Aztec gods, archontic gods, once worshipped in human sacrifice rituals in a curriculum designed to encourage them to challenge racist, bigoted, discriminatory, imperialist colonial beliefs, join social movements that struggle for social justice, and build new possibilities for a post-racist, post-systemic racism society. It's the usual woke crap that inverts racism and calls it anti-racism. In this case, solidarity with indigenous tribes is being used as an excuse to chant the names of gods to which people were sacrificed, and still are in secret. What an example of woke's inability to see beyond black and white, us and them. They condemn the colonization of these tribal cultures by Europeans, quite right. But those cultures sacrificing people, including children, to their gods, and mass murdering untold numbers as the Aztecs did, is just knee. One chant is to the Aztec god Tezcatlipoca, who had a man sacrificed to him in the 5th month of the Aztec calendar. His heart was cut out and he was eaten. Oh, that's okay then. Come on children, ere 3 other sacrificial gods for the young to chant their allegiance include Quetzalcoatl, Huitzilopochtli, and Zyp-Todik. The curriculum says that chants, armations, and energizers can be used to bring the class together, build unity around ethnic studies principles and values, and to reinvigorate the class following a lesson that may be emotionally taxing, or even when student engagement may appear to be low. Well, that's the cover story, anyway. Chanting and mantras are the repetition of a particular frequency generated from the vocal cords, and chanting the names of these archontic gods tunes you into their frequency. That is the last thing you want when it allows for energetic synchronization, attunement, and perceptual nuance. Initiates chant the names of their gods in their rituals for this very reason. Vampires of the woke. Pedophilia is another way that archons absorb the energy of children. Pedophiles possessed by archontic consciousness are used as the conduit during sexual abuse for discarnate archons to vampire the energy of the young they desire so much. Stupendous numbers of children disappear every year never to be seen again, although you would never know from the media. Imagine how much low vibrational energy has been generated by children during the COVID hoax, when so many have become depressed and psychologically destroyed to the point of killing themselves. Shocking numbers of children are now taken by the state from loving parents to be handed to others. I can tell you from long experience of researching this since 1996 that many end up with pedophiles and assets of the cult through corrupt and cult-owned social services, which in the reframing era has hired many psychopaths and emotionless automatons to do the job. Children are even stolen to order using spurious reasons to take them by the corrupt and secret, because they are corrupt family courts. I have read in detail in other books, starting with The Biggest Secret in 1997, about the ubiquitous connections between the political, corporate, government, intelligence and military elites, cult operatives, and Satanism and pedophilia. If you go deep enough, both networks have an interlocking leadership. The woke mentality has been developed by the cult for many reasons: to promote almost every aspect of its agenda, to hack the traditional political lay and turn it fascist, to divide and rule, and to target agenda pushbackers. But there are other reasons which relate to what I am describing here. How many happy and joyful wokers do you ever see, especially at the extreme end? They are a mental and psychological mess consumed by emotional stress, and constantly emotionally cocked for the next explosion of indignation at someone referring to a female as a female. They are walking, talking, berries, as Morpheus might say, emying frequencies, which both enslave them in low vibrational bubbles of perceptual limitation and feed the archons. Add to this the hatred claimed to be love, fascism claimed to anti-fascism, racism claimed to be anti-racism, exclusion claimed to inclusion, and the abuse-led internet trolling. You have a purpose-built archontic energy system with not a wind turbine in sight, and all founded on archontic inversion. We have whole generations now manipulated to serve the archons with their actions and energy. They will be doing so their entire adult lives, unless they snap out of their archon-induced trance. Is it really a surprise that cult billionaires and corporations put so much money their way? Where is the energy of joy and laughter, including laughing at yourself, which is consummation of your own emotional security? Mark Twain said, "The human race has one really effective weapon, and that is laughter. We must use it all the time." Woke has destroyed comedy because it has no humor, no joy, sense of irony, or self-deprecation. Its energy is dense and intense. Lunch says the archontic frequency. Rudolf Steiner, 1861 to 1925, was the Austrian philosopher and famous esoteric thinker who established Waldorf education or Steiner schools to treat children like unique expressions of consciousness, and not minds to be programmed with the perceptions determined by authority. I'd been writing about this energy vampiring for decades when I was sent in 2016 a quote by Steiner. He was spot on. There are beings in the spiritual realms for whom anxiety and fear emanating from human beings offer welcome food. When humans have no anxiety and fear, then these creatures starve. If fear and anxiety radiates from people and they break out in panic, then these creatures find welcome nutrition, and they become more and more powerful. These beings are hostile towards humanity. Everything that feeds on negative feelings, on anxiety, fear and superstition, despair or doubt, are in reality hostile forces in supersensible worlds, launching cruel attacks on human beings, while they are being fed. These are exactly the feelings that belong to contemporary culture and materialism. Because it estranges people from the spiritual world, it is especially suited to evoke hopelessness and fear of the unknown in people, thereby calling up the above-mentioned hostile forces against them. Pause for a moment from this perspective and reflect on what has happened in the world since the start of 2020. Not only will pennies drop, but billion-dollar bills. We see the same theme from Don Juan Matus, a Yaqui Indian shaman in Mexico and the information source for Peruvian-born writer Carlos Castaneda, who wrote a series of books from the 1960s to 1990s. Don Juan described the force manipulating human society, and his name for the archons was the predator. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our lord and master. It has rendered us docile, helpless. If we want to protest, it suppresses our protest. If we want to act independently, it demands that we don't do so. Indeed, we are held prisoner. They took us over because we are food to them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in coops, the predators rear us in human coops, human arrows. Therefore, their food is always available to them. Different cultures, different eras, same recurring theme. The Anoya dilemma. Nag Hammadi Gnostic manuscripts say that archon consciousness has no Anoya. This is directly translated as intentionality, but ill use the term creative imagination. The all that is in awareness of itself is the source of all creativity, all possibility, and the more disconnected you are from that source, the more you are subsequently denied creative imagination. Given that archon consciousness is almost entirely disconnected, it severely lacks creativity and has to rely on far more mechanical processes of thought and exploit the creative potential of those that do have Anoya. You can see cases of this throughout human society. Archon consciousness almost entirely dominates the global banking system, and if we study how that system works, you will appreciate what I mean. Banks manifest money out of nothing by issuing lines of credit, which is money that has never, does not, and will never exist except in theory. It's a condensed trick. If you think credit gears on a screen money is worth anything, you accept it as payment. If you don't, then the whole system collapses through lack of condense in the value of that money. Archontic bankers with no Anoya are lending money that doesn't exist to humans that do have creativity, those that have the inspired ideas, and create businesses and products. Archon banking feeds human creativity, which it controls through money creation and debt. Humans have the creativity, and archons exploit that for their own benefit and control while having none themselves. Archon internet platforms like Facebook claim joint copyright of everything that creative users post, and while archontic minds like Zuckerberg may officially head that company, it will be human creatives on the star that provide the creative inspiration. When you have limitless money, you can then buy other companies established by creative humans. Witness the acquisition record of Facebook, Google, and their like. Survey the archon-controlled music industry, and you see non-creative dark suit executives making their fortune from the human creativity of their artists. The cases are endless. Research the history of people like Gates and Zuckerberg and how their empires were built on exploiting the creativity of others. Archon minds cannot create out of nothing, but they are skilled because they have to be in what Gnostic texts call countermimicry. They can imitate, but not innovate. Sabaeans trawl the creativity of others through backdoors they install in computer systems through their cybersecurity systems. Archon-controlled China is globally infamous for stealing intellectual property, and I remember how Hong Kong, now part of China, became notorious for making counterfeit copies of the creativity of others' countermimicry. With the now pervasive and all-seeing surveillance systems able to infiltrate any computer, you can appreciate the potential for archons to vampire the creativity of humans. Author John Lamb Lash wrote in his book about the Nag Hammadi texts, not in his image, although they cannot originate anything, because they lack the divine factor of Anoya, intentionality. Archons can imitate with a vengeance. Their expertise is simulation, HAL, virtual reality. The demiurge Yaldabaoth fashions a heaven world copied from the fractal patterns of the original. His construction is celestial kitsch, like the fake Italianate villa of a mafia don, complete with militant angels to guard every portal. This brings us to something that I have been speaking about since the turn of the millennium. Our reality is a simulation, a virtual reality that we think is real. No, I'm not kidding. Human reality? Well, virtually I had pondered for years about whether our reality is real or some kind of construct. I remembered being immensely ecstatic on a visit as a small child in the late 1950s to the then newly opened planetarium on the Marylebone Road in London, which is now closed and part of the adjacent Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. It was in the middle of the day, but when the lights went out there was the night sky projected in the planetarium's domed ceiling, and it appeared to be so real. The experience never left me, and I didn't know why until around the turn of the millennium, when I became certain that our night sky and entire reality is a projection, a virtual reality, akin to the illusory world portrayed in the Matrix movies. I looked at the sky one day in this period, and it appeared to me like the domed roof of the planetarium. The release of the RSD Matrix movie in 1999 also provided a synchronistic and perfect visual representation of where my mind had been going for a long time. I hadn't come across the Gnostic Nag Hammadi texts then. When I did years later, the correlation was once again astounding. As I read Gnostic accounts from 1,600 years, and more earlier, it was clear that they were describing the same simulation phenomenon. They tell how the Yaldabaoth demiurge and archons created a bad copy of original reality to rule over all that were captured by its illusions, and the body was a prison to trap consciousness in the bad copy fake reality. Read how Gnostics describe the bad copy and update that to current times, and they are referring to what we would call today a virtual reality simulation. Author John Lamb Lash said the demiurge fashions a heaven world copied from the fractal patterns of the original through expertise in HAL, or virtual reality simulation. Fractal patterns are part of the energetic information construct of our reality, a sort of blueprint. If these patterns were copied in computer terms, it would indeed give you a copy of a natural reality in a non-natural frequency and digital form. The principle is the same as making a copy of a website. The original website still exists, but now you can change the copy version to make it whatever you like, and it can become very adherent to the original website. Archons have done this with our reality, a synthetic copy of prime reality that still exists beyond the frequency walls of the simulation. Trapped within the illusions of this synthetic matrix, however, were and are human consciousness and other expressions of prime reality, and this is why the Archons via the cult are seeking to make the human body synthetic and give us synthetic AI minds to complete the job of turning the entire reality synthetic, including what we perceive to be the natural world. To quote Kurzweil, nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. Yes, synthetic creatures, just as COVID and other genetically manipulating vaccines, are designed to make the human body synthetic. From this perspective, it is obvious why Archons and their cult are so desperate to infuse synthetic material into every human with their COVID scam. Let there be electromagnetic light. Yaldabaoth, the force that created the simulation, or matrix, makes sense of the Gnostic reference to the great architect and its use by cult Freemasonry as the name of its deity. The designer of the matrix in the movies is called the architect, and that trilogy is jam-packed with symbolism relating to these subjects. I have contended for years that the angry Old Testament god, Yaldabaoth, is the god being symbolically quoted in the opening of Genesis as creating the world. This is not the creation of prime reality, it's the creation of the simulation. The Genesis god says, "Let there be light," and there was light. But what is this light? I have said for decades that the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, is not the fastest speed possible as claimed by mainstream science, and is in fact the frequency walls or outer limits of the matrix. You can't have a fastest or slowest anything within all possibility when everything is possible. The human body is encoded to operate within the speed of light, or within the simulation, and thus we see only the tiny frequency band of visible light. Near-death experiencers, who perceive reality outside the body during temporary death, describe a very different form of light, and this is supported by the Nag Hammadi texts. Prime reality beyond the simulation, upper eons to the Gnostics, is described as a realm of incredible beauty, bliss, love, and harmony, a realm of watery light that is so powerful there are no shadows. Our false reality of Archon control, which Gnostics call the lower eons, is depicted as a realm with a different kind of light, and described in terms of chaos, hell, the abyss, and outer darkness, where trapped souls are tormented and manipulated by demons. Relate that to the COVID hoax alone. The watery light theme can be found in near-death accounts, and it is not the same as simulation light, which is electromagnetic or radiation light within the speed of light, the lower eons. Simulation light is the luminous re associated by Gnostics with the archons. The Bible refers to Yaldabaoth as that old serpent, called the devil, and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. Revelation 12:9. I think that making a simulated copy of prime reality, countermimicry, and changing it dramatically, while all the time manipulating humanity to believe it to be real, could probably meet the criteria of deceiving the whole world. Then, we come to the cult god Lucifer, the light bringer. Lucifer is symbolic of Yaldabaoth, the bringer of radiation light, that forms the bad copy simulation within the speed of light. He is symbolized by the lighted torch held by the Statue of Liberty, and in the name Illuminati. Sabbatean Frankism declares that Lucifer is the true God, and Lucifer is the real god of Freemasonry, honored as their great or grand architect of the universe simulation. I would emphasize, too, the way archontic technologically generated luminous re of radiation has deluged our environment since I was a kid in the 1950s, and changed the nature of the field with which we constantly interact. Through that interaction, technological radiation is changing us. The smart grid is designed to operate with immense levels of communication power, with 5G expanding across the world, and 6G, 7G, in the process of development. Radiation is the simulation and the archontic manipulation system. Why wouldn't the archon cult wish to unleash radiation upon us to an ever greater extreme to form? Kurzweil's cloud. The plan for a synthetic human is related to the need to cope with levels of radiation beyond even anything we've seen so far. Biological humans would not survive the scale of radiation they have in their script. The smart grid is a technological sub-reality within the technological simulation to further disconnect V-sense perception from expanded consciousness. It's a technological prison of the mind. Infusing the spirit of darkness, a recurring theme in religion and native cultures, is the manipulation of human genetics by a non-human force, and most famously recorded as the biblical sons of God, the gods plural in the original, who interbred with the daughters of men. The Nag Hammadi Apocryphon of John tells the same story this way. He Yaldabaoth sent his angels archonstamens to the daughters of men, that they might take some of them for themselves, and raise offspring for their enjoyment. And at first they did not succeed. When they had no success, they gathered together again and they made a plan together. And the angels changed themselves in their likeness into the likeness of their mates, filling them with the spirit of darkness, which they had mixed for them, and with evil. And they took women and begot children out of the darkness, according to the likeness of their spirit. Possession when a discarnate entity takes over a human body is an age-old theme, and continues today. It's very real and I've seen it. Satanic and secret society rituals can create an energetic environment in which entities can atch to initiates, and I've heard many stories of how people have changed their personality being initiated even into lower levels of the Freemasons. I have been inside 3 Freemasonic temples, 1 at a public open day and 2 by just walking in when there was no one around to stop me. They were in Ryde, the town where I live, Birmingham, England, when I was with a group, and Boston, Massachusetts. They all felt the same, energetically dark, dense, low vibrational, and sinister. Demonic atchment can happen while the initiate has no idea what is going on. To them, it's just a ritual to get in the Masons and do a bit of good business. In the far more extreme rituals of Satanism, human possession is even more powerful, and they are designed to make possession possible. The hierarchy of the cult is dictated by the power and perceived status of the possessing archon. In this way, the archon hierarchy becomes the cult hierarchy. Once the entity has atched, it can influence perception and behavior, and if it atches to the extreme, then so much of its energy, information, infuses into the body information eld that the hologram starts to wreak the nature of the possessing entity. This is the Exorcist movie type of possession when facial features change, and it's known as shape-sheeing. Islam's jinn are said to be invisible tricksters who change shape, whisper, confuse, and take human form. These are all traits of the archons, and other versions of the same phenomenon. Extreme possession could certainly infuse the spirit of darkness into a partner during sex, as the Nag Hammadi texts appear to describe. Such an infusion can change genetics, which is also energetic information. Human genetics is information, and the spirit of darkness is information. Mix one with the other, and change must happen. Islam has the concept of a jinn baby through possession of the mother, and by jinn taking human form. There are many ways that human genetics can be changed, and remember that Archons have been aware all along of advanced techniques to do this. What is being done in human society today, and far more, was known about by Archons at the time of the Fallen Ones, and their other versions described in religions and cultures. Archons and their human world cult are obsessed with genetics, as we see today, and they know this dictates how information is processed into perceived reality during a human life. They needed to produce a human form that would decode the simulation, and this is symbolically known as Adam and Eve, who lived the garden prime reality, and fell into matrix reality. The simulation is not a physical construct. There is no physical. It is a source of information. Think Wi-Fi again. The simulation is an energetic ELD encoded with information, and body-brain systems are designed to decode that information encoded in wave or frequency form, which is transmitted to the brain as electrical signals. These are decoded by the brain to construct our sense of reality, an illusory physical world that only exists in the brain or the mind. Virtual reality games mimic this process using the same sensory decoding system. Information is fed to the senses to decode a virtual reality that can appear so real, but isn't. Figs 18 and 19. Some scientists believe, and I agree with them, that what we perceive as physical reality only exists when we are looking or observing. The act of perception or focus triggers the decoding systems, which turn waveform information into holographic reality. When we are not observing something, our reality reverts from a holographic state to a waveform state. This relates to the same principle as a falling tree not making a noise unless someone is there to hear it or decode it. The concept makes sense from the simulation perspective. A computer is not decoding all the information in a Wi-Fi ELD all the time, and only decodes or brings into reality on the screen that part of Wi-Fi that it's decoding focusing upon at that moment. Figure 18. Virtual reality technology hacks into the body's five-sense decoding system. Figure 19. The result can be experienced as very real. Interestingly, Professor Donald Hamann at the Department of Cognitive Sciences at the University of California, Irvine, says that our experienced reality is like a computer interface that shows us only the level with which we interact, while hiding all that exists beyond it. Evolution shaped us with a user interface that hides the truth. Nothing that we see is the truth. The very language of space and time and objects is the wrong language to describe reality. He is correct in what he says on so many levels. Space and time are not a universal reality. They are a phenomenon of decoded simulation reality as part of the process of enslaving our sense of reality. Near-death experiencers report again and again how space and time did not exist as we perceive them once they were free of the body-body decoding systems. You can appreciate from this why Archons and their cult are so desperate to entrap human ancient in the V senses, where we are in the matrix and of the matrix. Opening your mind to expanded states of awareness takes you beyond the information cons of the simulation, and you become aware of knowledge and insights denied to you before. This is what we call awakening from the matrix, and in the Now chapter, I will relate this to current events. Where are the aliens? A simulation would explain the so-called Fermi paradox, named after Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, 1901 to 1954, who created the RST nuclear reactor. He considered the question of why there is such a lack of extraterrestrial activity when there are so many stars and planets in an apparently vast universe. But what if the night sky that we see, or think we do, is a simulated projection, as I say? If you control the simulation, and your aim is to hold humanity fast in essential ignorance, would you want other forms of life, including advanced life, coming and going sharing information with humanity? Or would you want them to believe they were isolated and apparently alone? Themes of human isolation and apartness are common whether they be the perception of a lifeless universe or the fascist isolation laws of the COVID era. Paradoxically, the very existence of a simulation means that we are not alone when some force had to construct it. My view is that experiences that people have reported all over the world for centuries with reptilians and gray entities are Archon phenomena, as Nag Hammadi texts describe, and that benevolent alien interactions are non-human groups that come in and out of the simulation by overcoming Archon imps to keep them out. It should be highlighted, too, that reptilians and greys are obsessed with genetics and technology, as related by cultural accounts, and those who say they have been abducted by them. Technology is their way of overcoming some of the limitations in their creative potential, and our technology-driven and controlled human society of today is archetypical archon, reptilian gray modus operandi. Technocracy is really archontocracy. The universe does not have to be as big as it appears with a simulation. There is no space or distance, only information decoded into holographic reality. What we call space is only the absence of holographic objects, and that space is the field of energetic information, which connects everything into a single whole. The same applies with the artificially generated information element of the simulation. The universe is not big or small as a physical reality. It is decoded information, that's all, and its perceived size is decided by the way the simulation is encoded to make it appear. The entire night sky as we perceive it only exists in our brain, and so where are those millions of light years? The stars on the ceiling of the planetarium looked a vast distance away. There's another point to mention about aliens. I have been highlighting since the 1990s the plan to stage a fake alien invasion to justify the centralization of global power and a world military. Nazi scientist Wernher von Braun, who was taken to America by Operation Paperclip Air World War II to help found NASA, told his American assistant Dr. Carol Rosin about the cult agenda when he knew he was dying in 1977. Rosin said that he told her about a sequence that would lead to total human control by a one-world government. This included threats from terrorism, rogue nations, meteors and asteroids before finally an alien invasion. All of these things, von Braun said, would be bogus, and what I would refer to as a no-problem reaction solution. Keep this in mind when the aliens are coming is the new mantra. The aliens are not coming, they are already here, and they have infiltrated human society while looking human. French-Canadian investigative journalist Serge Monast said in 1994 that he had uncovered a NASA military operation called Project Bluebeam, which ties with what Wernher von Braun predicted. Monast died of a heart attack in 1996, the day ere he was arrested, and spent a night in prison. He was 51. He said Bluebeam was a plan to stage an alien invasion that would include religious gears beamed holographically into the sky, as part of a global manipulation to usher in a new age of worshipping what I would say is the cult god Yaldabaoth in a one-world religion. Fake holographic asteroids are also said to be part of the plan, which again syncs with von Braun. How could you stage an illusory threat from asteroids unless they were holographic inserts? This is pretty straightforward given the advanced technology outside the public arena, and the fact that our physical reality is holographic anyway. Information elements would be projected, and we would decode them into the illusion of a physical asteroid. If they can sell a global pandemic with a virus that doesn't exist, what will humans not believe if government and media tell them? All this is particularly relevant as I write with the Pentagon planning to release in June 2021 information about UFO sightings. I have been following the UFO story since the early 1990s, and the common theme throughout has been government and military denials and cover-up. More recently, however, the Pentagon has suddenly become more talkative and apparently open with Air Force pilot radar images released of unexplained craw moving and changing direction at speeds well beyond anything believed possible with human technology. Then, in March 2021, former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe said a Pentagon report months later in June would reveal a great deal of information about UFO sightings unknown to the public. He said the report would have massive implications. The order to do this was included bizarrely in a $2.3 trillion coronavirus relief and government funding bill passed by the Trump administration at the end of 2020. I would add some serious notes of caution here. I have been pointing out since the 1990s that the U.S. military and intelligence networks have long had craw-ying saucers, or anti-gravity craw, which any observer would take to be extraterrestrial in origin. Keeping this knowledge from the public allows craw owned by humans to be perceived as alien visitations. I am not saying that aliens do not exist. I would be the last one to say that, but we have to be streetwise here. President Ronald Reagan told the UN General Assembly in 1987, "I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world." That's the idea. Unite against a common enemy with a common purpose behind your savior force, the cult. As this age-old technique of mass manipulation goes global, science moves this way. I could indeed only one other person who was discussing the simulation hypothesis publicly when I concluded it was real. This was Nick Bostrom, a Swedish-born philosopher at the University of Oxford, who has explored for many years the possibility that human reality is a computer simulation, although his version and mine are not the same. Today, the simulation and holographic reality hypothesis have increasingly entered the scientific mainstream. Well, the more open-minded mainstream, that is. Here are a few of the ever-gathering examples. American nuclear physicist Silas Bean led a team of physicists at the University of Bonn in Germany pursuing the question of whether we live in a simulation. They concluded that we probably do, and it was likely based on a lace of cubes. They found that cosmic rays align with that specific pattern. The team highlighted the Greisen-Zatsepin-Kuzmin (GZK) limit, which refers to cosmic ray particle interaction with cosmic background radiation that creates an apparent boundary for cosmic ray particles. They say in a paper entitled Constraints on the Universe as a Numerical Simulation that this pattern of constraint is exactly what you would end with a computer simulation. They also made the point that a simulation would create its own laws of physics that would limit possibility. I've been making the same point for decades, that the perceived laws of physics relate only to this reality, or what I would later call the simulation. When designers write codes to create computer and virtual reality games, they are the equivalent of the laws of physics for that game. Players interact within the limitations laid out by the coding. In the same way, those who wrote the codes for the simulation decided the laws of physics that would apply. These can be overridden by expanded states of consciousness, but not by those enslaved in only V-sense awareness where simulation codes rule. Overriding the codes is what people call miracles. They are not. They are bypassing the encoded limits of the simulation. A population caught in simulation perception would have no idea that this was their plight. As the Bond paper said, like a prisoner in a pitch-black cell, we would not be able to see the walls of our prison. That's true if people remain mesmerized by the V-senses. Open to expanded awareness, and those walls become very clear. The main one is the speed of light. American theoretical physicist James Gates is another who has explored the simulation question and found considerable evidence to support the idea. Gates was professor of physics at the University of Maryland, director of the Center for String and Particle Theory, and on Barack Obama's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. He and his team found computer codes of digital data embedded in the fabric of our reality. They relate to ono-electrical charges of 1 and 0 in the binary system used by computers. We have no idea what they are doing there, Gates said. They found within the energetic fabric mathematical sequences, known as error-correcting codes or block codes, that reboot data to its original state, or default settings, when something knocks it out of sync. Gates was asked if he had found a set of equations embedded in our reality, indistinguishable from those that drive search engines and browsers, and he said, "That is correct." Rich Terrile, director of the Center for Evolutionary Computation and Automated Design at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, has said publicly that he believes the universe is a digital hologram that must have been created by a form of intelligence. I agree with that in every way. Waveform information is delivered electrically by the senses to the brain, which constructs a digital holographic reality that we call the world. This digital level of reality can be read by the esoteric art of numerology. Digital holograms are at the queuing edge of holographics today. We have digital technology everywhere designed to access and manipulate our digital level of perceived reality. Synthetic mRNA in COVID vaccines has a digital component to manipulate the body's digital operating system. Reality is numbers. How many know that our reality can be broken down to numbers and codes that are the same as computer games? Max Tegmark, a physicist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, is the author of Our Mathematical Universe, in which he lays out how reality can be entirely described by numbers and maths, in the way that a video game is encoded with the physics of computer games. Our world and computer virtual reality are essentially the same. Tegmark imagines the perceptions of characters in an advanced computer game when the graphics are so good they don't know they are in a game. They think they can bump into real objects, electromagnetic resistance in our reality, fall in love and feel emotions like excitement. When they began to study the apparently physical world of the video game, they would realize that everything was made of pixels, which have been found in our energetic reality, as must be the case when on one level our world is digital. What computer game characters thought was physical Stu Tegmark said, could actually be broken down into numbers. And we're exactly in this situation in our world. We look around, and it doesn't seem that mathematical at all, but everything we see is made out of elementary particles like quarks and electrons. And what properties does an electron have? Does it have a smell or a color or a texture? No. We physicists have come up with geeky names for electron properties like electric charge or spin or lepton number, but the electron doesn't care what we call it. The properties are just numbers. This is the illusory reality Gnostics were describing. This is the simulation. The A, C, G, and T codes of DNA have a binary value and C0 while G and T1. This has to be when the simulation is digital, and the body must be digital to interact with it. Recurring mathematical sequences are encoded throughout reality and the body. They include the Fibonacci sequence, in which the two previous numbers are added to get the next one, as in 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, etc. The sequence is encoded in the human face and body, proportions of animals, DNA, seed heads, pine cones, trees, shells, spiral galaxies, hurricanes, and the number of petals in a oar. The list goes on and on. There are fractal patterns, a never-ending pattern that is innately complex and self-similar across all scales in the as above, so below, principle of holograms. These and other famous recurring geometrical and mathematical sequences such as phi, pi, golden mean, golden ratio, and golden section are computer codes of the simulation. I had to laugh and give my head a shake the day I niched this book, and it went into the production stage. I was sent an article in Scientific American published in April 2021 with the headline columned, "We live in a simulation." 2 decades ere IRST said our reality is a simulation, and the speed of light is its outer limit. The article suggested that we do live in a simulation, and that the speed of light is its outer limit. I left school at 15 and never passed a major exam in my life, while the writer was up to his eyes in qualifications. As I will explain in the now chapter, knowing is far beer than thinking, and they come from very different sources. The article rightly connected the speed of light to the processing speed of the matrix, and said what has been in my books all this time: if we are in a simulation, as it appears, then space is an abstract property written in code. It is not real. No, it's not, and if we live in a simulation, something created it, and it wasn't us. That David Icke says we are manipulated by aliens, he's crackers. Wow, the reality that humanity thinks is so real is an illusion. Politicians, governments, scientists, doctors, academics, law enforcement, media, school and university curriculums, on and on, are all founded on a world that does not exist except as a simulated prison cell. Is it such a stretch to accept that COVID doesn't exist when our entire physical reality doesn't exist? Revealed here is the knowledge kept under wraps in the cult networks of compartmentalized secrecy to control humanity's sense of reality, by inducing the population to believe in a reality that's not real. If it wasn't so tragic in its experiential consequences, the whole thing would be hysterically funny. None of this is new to renegade minds. Ancient Greek philosopher Plato, about 428 to about 347 BC, was a major in nuance on Gnostic belief, and he described the human plight thousands of years ago with his allegory of the cave. He told the symbolic story of prisoners living in a cave, who had never been outside. They were chained and could only see one wall of the cave, while behind them was a re that they could not see. Figures walked past the recasting shadows on the prisoner's wall, and those moving shadows became their sense of reality. Some prisoners began to study the shadows and were considered experts on them, today's academics and scientists. But what they studied was only an illusion, today's academics and scientists. A prisoner escaped from the cave and saw reality as it really is. When he returned to report this revelation, they didn't believe him, called him mad, and threatened to kill him if he tried to set them free. Plato's tale is not only a brilliant analogy of the human plight and our illusory reality, it describes, too, the dynamics of the COVID hoax. I have only skimmed the surface of these subjects here. The aim of this book is to crisply connect all essential dots to put what is happening today into its true context. All subject areas and their connections in this chapter are covered in great evidential detail in everything you need to know, but have never been told, and the answer. They say that bewildered people can't see the forest for the trees. Humanity, however, can't see the forest for the twigs. The V senses see only twigs, while renegade minds can see the forest, and it's the forest where the answers lie with the connections that reveals. Breaking free of perceptual programming so the forest can be seen is the way we turn all this around. Not breaking free is how humanity got into this mess. The situation may seem hopeless, but I promise you it's not. We are a perceptual heartbeat from paradise if only we knew. Our Chapter 12, Escaping Wetiko Life, is simply a vacation from the infinite Dean Kavanagh Renegade Minds, weave the web of life and events, and see common themes in the apparently random. They are always there if you look for them, and their pursuit is aided by incredible synchronicity that comes when your mind is open rather than mesmerized by what it thinks it can see. Innate awareness is innate possibility, and the more of innate possibility that we access, the more becomes innately possible. That may be stating the apparently obvious, but it is a devastatingly powerful fact that can set us free. We are a point of Ancient within an innity of consciousness. The question is, how much of that innity do we choose to access? How much knowledge, insight, awareness, wisdom do we want to connect with and explore? If your focus is only in the V-senses, you will be influenced by a fraction of innate awareness. I mean a range so tiny that it gives new meaning to innatesimal. Limitation of self-identity and a sense of the possible limit accordingly your range of consciousness. We are what we think we are. Life is what we think it is. The dream is the dreamer and the dreamer is the dream. Buddhist philosophy puts it this way: as a thing is viewed, so it appears. Most humans live in the realm of touch, taste, see, hear, and smell, and that's the limit of their sense of the possible and sense of self. Many will follow a religion and speak of a God in his heaven, but their lives are still dominated by the V-senses in their perceptions and actions. The V-senses become the arbiter of everything. When that happens, all except a smear of innity is sealed away from a nuance by the rigid, unyielding reality bubbles that are the V-sense human or phantom self. Archon cult methodology is to isolate consciousness within V-sense reality, the simulation, and then program that consciousness with a sense of self and the world through a deluge of lifelong information, designed to instill the desired perception that allows global control. Efforts to do this have increased dramatically with identity politics, as identity bubbles are squeezed into the minutiae of V-sense detail, which disconnect people even more profoundly from the innate I. Five-sense focus and self-identity are like a wall that limits access to the innate realms. You only perceive one radio or television station and no other. Well, take that literally for a moment. Imagine a vast array of stations giving different information and angles on reality, but you only ever listen to one. Here we have the human plight, in which the population is overwhelmingly conned to cult FM. This relates only to the frequency range of cult FM and limits perception and insight to that band, limits possibility to that band. It means you are connecting with an almost imperceptibly minuscule range of possibility and creative potential within the innate field. It's a world where everything seems apart from everything else, and where synchronicity is rare. Synchronicity is defined in the dictionary as the happening by chance of two or more related or similar events at the same time. Use of by chance betrays a complete misunderstanding of reality. Synchronicity is not by chance. As people open their minds, or awaken to use the term, they notice more and more coincidences in their lives, bits of luck, apparently miraculous happenings that put them in the right place at the right time with the right people. Days become peppered with fancy meeting you here, and what are the chances of that? My entire life has been lived like this, and ever more so since my own colossal awakening in 1990 and 91, which transformed my sense of reality. Synchronicity is not by chance. It is by accessing expanded realms of possibility which allow expanded potential for manifestation. People broadcasting the same vibe from the same openness of mind tend to be drawn by chance to each other through what I call frequency magnetism, and it's not only people. In the last more than 30 years, incredible synchronicity has also led me through the cult maze, to information in so many forms, and to crucial personal experiences. These coincidences have allowed me to put the puzzle pieces together across an enormous array of subjects and situations. Those who have breached the bubble of V-sense reality will know exactly what I mean, and this escape from the perceptual prison cell is open to everyone whenever they make that choice. This may appear superhuman when compared with the limitations of human, but it's really our natural state. Human as currently experienced is consciousness in an unnatural state of induced separation from the innity of the whole. I'll come to how this transformation into unity can be made when I have described in more detail the force that holds humanity in servitude by denying this access to innate self. The Wetiko factor I have been talking and writing for decades about the way V-Sense Mind is systematically barricaded from expanded awareness. I have used the analogy of a computer V-Sense Mind and someone at the keyboard expanded awareness. Interaction between the computer and the operator is symbolic of the interaction between V-Sense Mind and expanded awareness. The computer directly experiences the internet, and the operator experiences the internet via the computer, which is how it's supposed to be, the two working as one. Archons seek to control that point, where the operator connects with the computer to stop that interaction. Fig 20. Now the operator is banging the keyboard and clicking the mouse, but the computer is not responding, and this happens when the computer is taken over, possessed by an appropriately named computer virus. The operator has lost all nuance over the computer, which goes its own way, making decisions under the control of the virus. I have just described the dynamic through which the force known to Gnostics as Yaldabaoth and Archons disconnects V-Sense Mind from expanded awareness to imprison humanity in perceptual servitude. Figure 20. The mind virus I have been writing about for decades seeks to isolate Five-Sense Mind, the computer, from the true I. Image by Icke. About a year ago, I came across a Native American concept of Wetiko, which describes precisely the same phenomenon. Wetiko is the spelling used by the Cree, and there are other versions including Wintiko and Windigo used by other tribal groups. They spell the name with lowercase, but I see Wetiko as a proper noun as with Archons and prefer a capital. I saw an article about Wetiko by writer and researcher Paul Levy, which so synced with what I had been writing about the computer-operator disconnection and later the Archons. I then read his book, The Fascinating Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Spell of Evil. The parallels between what I had concluded long before and the Native American concept of Wetiko were so clear and obvious that it was almost funny. For Wetiko, see the Gnostic Archons for sure, and the Jinn, the Predators, and every other name for a force of evil, inversion, and chaos. Wetiko is the Native American name for the force that divides the computer from the operator. Fig 21. Indigenous author Jack D. Forbes, a founder of the Native American movement in the 1960s, wrote another book about Wetiko entitled Columbus and Other Cannibals: The Wetiko Disease of Exploitation, Imperialism, and Terrorism, which I also read. Forbes says that Wetiko refers to an evil person or spirit who terrorizes other creatures by means of terrible acts, including cannibalism. Zulu shaman Credo Mutwa told me that African accounts tell how cannibalism was brought into the world by the Chitori gods, another manifestation of Wetiko. The distinction between evil person or spirit relates to Archon's Wetiko possessing a human or acting as pure consciousness. Wetiko is said to be a sickness of the soul or spirit, and a state of being that takes, but gives nothing back, the cult, and its operatives perfectly described. Black Hawk, a Native American war leader defending their lands from confiscation, said European invaders had poisoned hearts, Wetiko hearts, and that this would spread to native societies. Mention of the heart is very significant, as we shall shortly see. Forbes writes, tragically, the history of the world for the past 2,000 years is, in great part, the story of the epidemiology of the Wetiko disease. Yes, and much longer. Forbes is correct when he says, the Wetikos destroyed Egypt and Babylon and Athens and Rome and Tenochtitlan, capital of the Aztec Empire, and perhaps now they will destroy the entire earth. Evil, he said, is the #1 export of a Wetiko culture. See its globalization with COVID. Constant war, mass murder, sewering of all kinds, child abuse, Satanism, torture, and human sacrifice are all expressions of Wetiko and the Wetiko possessed. The world is Wetiko made manifest, but it doesn't have to be. There is a way out of this even now. Figure 21. The mind virus is known to Native Americans as Wetiko. Image by Neil Haig. Cult of Wetiko. Wetiko is the Yaldabaoth frequency distortion that seeks to attach to human consciousness and absorb it into its own. Once this connection is made, Wetiko can drive the perceptions of the target which they believe to be coming from their own mind. All the horrors of history, and today from mass killers to Satanists, pedophiles like Jerry Epstein and other psychopaths, are the embodiment of Wetiko and express its state of being in all its grotesqueness. The cult is Wetiko incarnate, Yaldabaoth incarnate, and it seeks to facilitate Wetiko assimilation of humanity in totality into its distortion by manipulating the population into low-frequency states that match its own. Paul Levy writes, holographically enforced within the psyche of every human being, the Wetiko virus pervades and underlies the entire eld of consciousness, and can therefore potentially manifest through any one of us at any moment if we are not mindful. The COVID hoax has achieved this with many people, but others have not fallen into Wetiko's frequency layer. Players in the COVID human catastrophe including Gates, Schwab, Tedros, Fauci, Wee, Valance, Johnson, Hancock, Ferguson, Drosten, and all the rest, including the psychopath psychologists, are expressions of Wetiko. This is why they have no compassion or empathy, and no emotional consequence for what they do that would make them stop doing it. Observe all the people who support the psychopaths in authority against the pushbackers, despite the damaging impact the psychopaths have on their own lives and their families' lives. You are again looking at Wetiko possession, which prevents them seeing through the lies to the obvious scam going on. Why can't they see it? Wetiko won't let them see it. The perceptual divide that has now become a chasm is between the Weticode and the non-Weticode. Paul Levy describes Wetiko in the same way that I have long described the Archontic force. They are the same distorted consciousness, operating across dimensions of reality. The subtle body of Wetiko is not located in the third dimension of space and time, literally existing in another dimension. It is able to eke ordinary lives by mysteriously interpenetrating into our three-dimensional world. Wetiko does this through its incarnate representatives in the cult, and by weaving itself into the field, which on our level of reality is the electromagnetic information eld of the simulation or matrix. More than that, the simulation is Wetiko Yaldabaoth. Caleb Scharf, director of astrobiology at Columbia University, has speculated that alien life could be so advanced that it has transcribed itself into the quantum realm to become what we call physics. He said intelligence indistinguishable from the fabric of the universe would solve many of its greatest mysteries. Perhaps hyper-advanced life isn't just external. Perhaps it's already all around. It is embedded in what we perceive to be physics itself, from the root behavior of particles and fields to the phenomena of complexity and emergence. In other words, life might not just be in the equations. It might be the equations my emphasis. Scharf said it is possible that we don't recognize advanced life because it forms an integral and unsuspicious part of what we've considered to be the natural world. I agree. Wetiko Yaldabaoth is the simulation. We are literally in the body of the beast. But that doesn't mean it has to control us. We all have the power to overcome Wetiko. Inuance and the cult knows that. I doubt it sleeps too well because it knows that. Which field? This, I suggest, is how it all works. There are two fields. One is the Earth's electromagnetic light of the matrix within the speed of light. The other is the watery light of the field beyond the walls of the matrix that connects with the great Innity. Five-sense mind and the decoding systems of the body attach us to the field of matrix light. They have to, or we could not experience this reality. Five-sense mind sees only the matrix field of information, while our expanded consciousness is part of the Innity field. When we open our minds, and most importantly our hearts, to the Innity field, we have a mission control which gives us an expanded perspective, a roadmap, to understand the nature of the V-sense world. If we are isolated only in V-sense mind, there is no mission control. We're on our own trying to understand a world that's constantly feeding us information to ensure we do not understand. People in this state can feel lost and bewildered with no direction or radar. You can see ever more clearly those who are inuanced by the fields of Big Innity or Lyle V-sense mind simply by their views and behavior with regard to the COVID hoax. We have had this division throughout known human history, with the mass of the people on one side and individuals who could see and intuit beyond the walls of the simulation Plato's prisoner, who broke out of the cave and saw reality for what it is. Such people have always been targeted by Wetiko Archon-possessed authority, burned at the stake, or demonized as mad, bad, and dangerous. The cult today and its global network of anti-hate, anti-fascist woke groups are all expressions of Wetiko awking those exposing the conspiracy, COVID lies, and the vaccine agenda. Woke as a whole is Wetiko, which explains its black and white mentality and how at one it is with the Wetiko-possessed cult. Paul Levy said, "To be in this paradigm is to still be under the thrall of a two-valued logic, where things are either true or false of a Wetikoized mind. Wetiko consciousness is in a permanent rage, therefore so is woke, and then there is woke inversion and contradiction. Anti-fascists act like fascists because fascists and anti-fascists are both Wetiko at work. Political parties act the same while claiming to be different for the same reason. Secret society and satanic rituals are aching initiates to Wetiko and the cold, ruthless, psychopathic mentality that secures the positions of power all over the world is Wetiko. Reframing training programs have the same cumulative Icke of Aching Wetiko, and we have their graduates described as automatons and robots, with a cold, psychopathic, uncaring demeanor. They are all traits of Wetiko possession, and look how many times they have been described in this book, and elsewhere with regard to personnel behind COVID, including the police and medical profession. Climbing the greasy pole in any profession in a Wetiko society requires traits of Wetiko to get there, and that is particularly true of politics, which is not about fair competition and preeminence of ideas. It is founded on how many backs you can stab and arses you can lick. This culminated in the global COVID coordination between the Wetiko possessed, who pulled it in all the different countries, without a trace of empathy and compassion for their impact on humans. Our sight sense can see only holographic form and not the field which connects holographic form. Therefore we perceive physical objects with space in between. In fact, that space is energy consciousness operating on multiple frequencies. One of them is Wetiko, and that connects the cult psychopaths, those who submit to the psychopaths, and those who serve the psychopaths in the media operations of the world. Wetiko is Gates. Wetiko is the mask-wearing submissive. Wetiko is the fake journalist and fact-checker. The Wetiko field is coordinating the whole thing. Psychopaths, gophers, media operatives, anti-hate groups, fact-checkers and submissive people work as one unit even without human coordination, because they are attached to the same field which is organizing it all. Fig 22. Paul Levy is here describing how Wetiko-possessed people are drawn together and refuse to let any information breach their rigid perceptions. He was rioting long before COVID, but I think you will recognize followers of the COVID religion, just a little bit. People who are channeling the vibratory frequency of Wetiko align with each other through psychic resonance to reinforce their unspoken shared agreement so as to uphold their deranged view of reality. Once an unconscious content takes possession of certain individuals, it irresistibly draws them together by mutual attraction and knits them into groups tied together by their shared madness that can easily swell into an avalanche of insanity. A psychic epidemic is a closed system, which is to say that it is insular and not open to any new information or informing influences from the outside world which contradict its fixed, limited, and limiting perspective. There we have the woke mind and the COVID mind. Compatible resonance draws the awakening together, too, which is clearly happening today. Figure 22, the Wetiko field from which the cult pyramid and its personnel are made manifest. Image by Neil Haig. Spiritual servitude. Wetiko doesn't care about humans. It's not human, it just possesses humans for its own ends, and the Icke, depending on the scale of possession, can be anything from extreme psychopathy to unquestioning obedience. Wetiko's worst nightmare is for human consciousness to expand beyond the simulation. Everything is focused on stopping that happening through control of information, thus perception, thus frequency. The education system, media, science, medicine, academia, are all geared to maintaining humanity in V-sense servitude, as is the constant stimulation of low-vibrational mental and emotional states. See COVID. Wetiko seeks to dominate those subconscious spaces between V-sense perception and expanded consciousness, where the computer meets the operator. From these subconscious hiding places, Wetiko speaks to us to trigger urges and desires that we take to be our own, and manipulate us into anything from low-vibrational to psychopathic states. Remember how Islam describes the jinn as invisible tricksters that whisper and confuse. Wetiko is the origin of the trickster god theme that you find in cultures all over the world. Jinn, like the archons, are Wetiko, which is tarried of humans awakening and reconnecting with our true self, for then its energy source has gone. With that, the feedback loop breaks between Wetiko and human perception that provides the energetic momentum on which its very existence depends as a force of evil. Humans are both its target and its source of survival, but only if we are operating in low vibrational states of fear, hate, depression, and the background anxiety that most people sewer. We are Wetiko's target because we are its key to survival. It needs us, not the other way round. Paul Levy writes, "A vampire has no intrinsic, independent, substantial existence in its own right. It only exists in relation to us." The pathogenic, vampiric mind parasite called Wetiko is nothing in itself, not being able to exist from its own side. Yet it has a virtual reality such that it can potentially destroy our species. The fact that a vampire is not reflected by a mirror can also mean that what we need to see is that there's nothing, no thing to see, other than ourselves. The fact that Wetiko is the expression of something inside of us means that the cure for Wetiko is with us as well. The critical issue is finding this cure within us, and then putting it into effect. Evil begets evil because if evil does not constantly expand, and indeed new sources of energetic sustenance, its evil, its distortion, dies with the assimilation into balance and harmony. Love is the garlic to Wetiko's vampire. Evil, the absence of love, cannot exist in the presence of love. I think I see a way out of here. I have emphasized so many times over the decades that the Archons Wetiko and their cult are not all-powerful. They are not. I don't care how it looks, even now they are not. I have not called them lil boys in short trousers for Icke. I have said it because it is true. Wetiko's insatiable desire for power over others is not a sign of its omnipotence, but its insecurity. Paul Levy writes, due to the primal fear which ultimately drives it, and which it is driven to cultivate, Wetiko's body politic has an intrinsic and insistent need for centralizing power and control so as to create imagined safety for itself. Yees, exactly. Why does Wetiko want humans in an ongoing state of fear? Wetiko itself is fear and it is petried of love. As evil is an absence of love, so love is an absence of fear. Love conquers all and especially Wetiko, which is fear. Wetiko brought fear into the world when it wasn't here before. Fear was the fall into low-frequency ignorance, and illusion. Fear is false emotion appearing real. The simulation is driven and energized by fear, because Wetiko Yaldabaoth fear are the simulation. Fear is the absence of love, and Wetiko is the absence of love. Wetiko today, we can now view current events from this level of perspective. The COVID hoax has generated momentous amounts of ongoing fear, anxiety, depression, and despair which have empowered Wetiko. No wonder people like Gates have been the instigators when they are Wetiko incarnate, and exhibit every trait of Wetiko in the extreme. See how cold and unemotional these people are, like Gates and his cronies, how dead of eye they are. That's Wetiko. Sabations are Wetiko and everything they control, including the World Health Organization, Big Pharma and the vaccine makers, national health hierarchies, corporate media, Silicon Valley, the banking system, and the United Nations with its planned transformation into world government. All are controlled and possessed by the Wetiko distortion into distorting human society in its image. We are with this knowledge at the gateway to understanding the world. Divisions of race, culture, creed, and sexuality are diversions to hide the real division between those possessed and influenced by Wetiko and those that are not. The COVID hoax has brought both clearly into view. Human behavior is not about race. Tyrants and dictatorships come in all colors and creeds. What unites the U.S. president bombing the innocent and an African tribe committing genocide against another as in Rwanda? What unites them? Wetiko. All wars are Wetiko, all genocide is Wetiko, all hunger over centuries in a world of plenty is Wetiko. Children going to bed hungry, including in the West, is Wetiko. Cult-generated woke racial divisions that focus on the body are designed to obscure the reality that divisions in behavior are manifestations of mind, not body. Obsession with body identity and group judgment is a means to divert attention from the real source of behavior, mind, and perception. Connect sown by the woke both within themselves and with their target groups are Wetiko providing lunch for itself through still more agents of the division, chaos, and fear on which it feeds. The cult is seeking to assimilate the entirety of humanity and all children and young people into the Wetiko frequency by manipulating them into states of fear and despair. Witness all the suicide and psychological unraveling since the spring of 2020. Wetiko psychopaths want to impose a state of unquestioning obedience to authority, which is no more than a conduit for Wetiko to enforce its will and assimilate humanity into itself. It needs us to believe that resistance is futile when it fears resistance, and even more so the game-changing non-cooperation with its impositions. It can use violent resistance for its Bennett. Violent impositions and violent resistance are both Wetiko. The power of love with its power of no will sweep Wetiko from our world. Wetiko and its cult know that. They just don't want us to know. AI Wetiko. This brings me to AI or artificial intelligence, and something else Wetikos don't want us to know. What is AI really? I know about computer code algorithms and AI that learns from data input. These, however, are more diversions, the expeditionary force, for the real AI that they want to connect to the human brain as promoted by Silicon Valley Wetikos like Kurzweil. What is this AI? It is the frequency of Wetiko, the frequency of the archons. The connection of AI to the human brain is the connection of the Wetiko frequency to create a Wetiko hive mind and complete the job of assimilation. The hive mind is planned to be controlled from Israel and China, which are both 100% owned by Wetiko Sabations. The assimilation process has been going on minute by minute in the smart era, which fused with the COVID era. We are told that social media is scrambling the minds of the young and changing their personality. This is true, but what is social media? Look more deeply at how it works, how it creates divisions and connect, the hostility and cruelty, the targeting of people until they are destroyed. That's Wetiko. Social media is manipulated to tune people to the Wetiko frequency with all the emotional exploitation tricks employed by platforms like Facebook and its Wetiko frontman, Zuckerberg. Facebook's Instagram announced a new platform for children to overcome a legal bar on them using the main site. This is more Wetiko exploitation and manipulation of kids. Amnesty International likened the plan to foxes owing to guard the henhouse and said it was incompatible with human rights. Since when did Wetiko or Zuckerberg, I repeat myself, care about that? Would Brin and Page at Google, would Siki at YouTube, Bezos at Amazon, and whoever the hell runs Twitter act as they do if they were not channeling Wetiko? Would those who are developing technologies for no other reason than human control? How about those designing and selling technologies to kill people, and big pharma drug and vaccine producers, who know they will end or devastate lives? Quite a thought for these people to consider, is that if you are Wetiko in a human life, you are Wetiko on the other side, unless your frequency changes, and that can only change by a change of perception, which becomes a change of behavior. Where Gates is going does not bear thinking about, although perhaps that's exactly where he wants to go. Either way, that's where he's going. His frequency will make it so. The frequency layer. I have been saying for a long time that a big part of the addiction to smartphones and devices is that a frequency is coming o' them that entraps the mind. People spend ages on their phones, and sometimes even a minute or so ere they put them down, they pick them up again, and it all repeats. COVID lockdowns will have increased this addiction a million times for obvious reasons. Addictions to alcohol, overindulgence, and drugs are another way that Wetiko entraps consciousness to otch to its own. Both are symptoms of low vibrational psychological distress, which alcoholism and drug addiction further compound. Do we think it's really a coincidence that access to them is made so easy, while potions that can take people into realms beyond the simulation are banned and illegal? I have explored smartphone addiction in other books. The scale is mind-blowing, and that level of addiction does not come without help. Tech companies that make these phones are Wetiko, and they will have no qualms about destroying the minds of children. We are seeing again with these companies the Wetiko perceptual combination of psychopathic enforcers and weak and meek unquestioning compliance by the rank and la. The global smart grid is the Wetiko grid, and it is crucial to complete the cult endgame. The simulation is radiation, and we are being deluged with technological radiation on a devastating scale. Wetiko frauds like Elon Musk serve cult interests, while occasionally criticizing them to maintain his street cred. 5G and other forms of Wi-Fi are being directed at the Earth from space on a volume and scale that goes on increasing by the day. Elon Musk's Oshly SpaceX Starlink project is in the process of pewing tens of thousands of satellites in low orbit to cover every inch of the planet with 5G and other Wi-Fi to create Kurzweil's global cloud, to which the human mind is planned to be otched very soon. SpaceX has approval to operate 12,000 satellites, with more than 1,300 launched at the time of writing, and applications led for 30,000 more. Other operators in the Wi-Fi 5G low-orbit satellite market include OneWeb UK, Telesat Canada, and ASD Science US. Musk tells us that AI could be the end of humanity, and then launches a company called Neuralink to connect the human brain to computers. Musk's, in theory, Tesla company is building electric cars and the driverless vehicles of the smart control grid. As frauds and bullshitters go, Elon Musk, in my opinion, is major league. 5G and technological radiation in general are destructive to human health, genetics, and psychology, and increasing the strength of artificial radiation underpins the V-sense perceptual bubbles, which are themselves expressions of radiation or electromagnetism. Freedom activist John Whitehead was so right with his databit by databit. We are building our own electronic concentration camps. The smart grid and 5G is a means to control the human mind and infuse perceptual information into the field to nuance anyone in sync with its frequency. You can change perception and behavior en masse if you can manipulate the population into those levels of frequency, and this is happening all around us today. The arrogance of Musk and his fellow cult operatives knows no bounds in the way that we see with Gates. Musk's satellites are so many in number already they are changing the night sky when viewed from Earth. The astronomy community has complained about this, and they have seen nothing yet. Some consequences of Musk's Wetiko hubris include radiation, visible pollution of the night sky, interference with astronomy and meteorology, ground and water pollution from intensive use of increasingly many spaceports, accumulating space debris, continual deorbiting and burning up of aging satellites, polluting the atmosphere with toxic dust and smoke, and ever-increasing likelihood of collisions. A collective public open leer of complaint to Musk said, "We are writing to you because SpaceX is in process of surrounding the Earth with a network of thousands of satellites, whose very purpose is to irradiate every square inch of the Earth. SpaceX, like everyone else, is treating the radiation as if it were not there. As if the mitochondria in our cells do not depend on electrons moving undisturbed from the food we digest to the oxygen we breathe. As if our nervous systems and our hearts are not subject to radio frequency interference like any piece of electronic equipment. As if the cancer, diabetes, and heart disease that now afflict a majority of the Earth's population are not metabolic diseases that result from interference with our cellular machinery. As if insects everywhere, and the birds and animals that eat them, are not starving to death as a result. People like Musk and Gates believe in their limitless Wetiko arrogance that they can do whatever they like to the world because they own it. Consequences for humanity are irrelevant. It's absolutely time that we stop taking this shit from these self-styled masters of the Earth when you consider where this is going. Why is the cult so anti-human? I hear this question why would they do this when it will eke them too? Ah, but will it? Who is this them? Forget their bodies. They are just vehicles for Wetiko consciousness. When you break it all down to the foundations, we are looking at a state of severely distorted consciousness targeting another state of consciousness for assimilation. The rest is detail. The simulation is the white trap in which unique sensations of the V senses create a cycle of addiction called reincarnation. Renegade minds see that everything which happens in our reality is a smaller version of the whole picture in line with the holographic principle. Addiction to the radiation of smart technology is a smaller version of addiction to the whole simulation. Connecting the body brain to AI is taking that addiction on a giant step further to total ongoing control by assimilating human incarnate consciousness into Wetiko. I have watched during the COVID hoax how many are becoming ever more profoundly attached to Wetiko's perceptual calling cards of aggressive response to any other point of view. There is no other God but me. Psychopathic lack of compassion and empathy, and servile submission to the narrative and will of authority. Wetiko is the psychopaths and subservience to psychopaths. The cult of Wetiko is so anti-human because it is not human. It embarked on a mission to destroy human by targeting everything that it means to be human and to survive as human. COVID is not the end, just a means to an end. The cult with its Wetiko consciousness is seeking to change Earth systems, including the atmosphere, to suit them, not humans. The gathering bombardment of 5G alone from ground and space is dramatically changing the field with which the V senses interact. There is so much more to come if we sit on our hands and hope it will all go away. It is not meant to go away. It is meant to get ever more extreme, and we need to face that while we still can just. Carbon dioxide is the gas of life. Without that, human is over. Kaput, gone, history. No natural world, no human. The cult has created a cock and bull story about carbon dioxide and climate change to justify its reduction to the point where Gates and the ignoramus Biden climate chief John Kerry want to suck it out of the atmosphere. Kerry wants to do this because his master Gates does. Wetikos have made the gas of life a demon with the usual support from the wokers of Extinction Rebellion and similar organizations, and the bewildered puppet child that is Greta Thunberg, who was put on the world stage by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. The name Extinction Rebellion is both ironic and, as always, Wetiko inversion. The gas that we need to survive must be reduced to save us from extinction. The most basic need of human is oxygen, and we now have billions walking around in face, napas depriving body and brain of this essential requirement of human existence. More than that, 5G at 60 GHz interacts with the oxygen molecule to reduce the amount of oxygen the body can absorb into the bloodstream. The obvious knock-on consequences of that, for respiratory and cognitive problems and life itself, need no further explanation. Psychopaths like Musk are assembling a global system of satellites to deluge the human atmosphere with this insanity. The man should be in jail. Here we have two most basic of human needs, oxygen and carbon dioxide, being dismantled. Two others, water and food, are getting similar treatment with the United Nations Agendas 21 and 2030, the Great Reset planning to centrally control all water and food supplies. People will not even own rainwater that falls on their land. Food is eked at the most basic level by reducing carbon dioxide. We have genetic modification, or GMO, infiltrating the food chain on a mass scale, pesticides and herbicides polluting the air and destroying the soil. Freshwater SH that provide livelihoods for 60 million people and feed hundreds of millions worldwide are being pushed to the brink according to conservationists, while climate change is the only focus. Now, we have Gates and Schwab wanting to dispense with current food sources altogether and replace them with a synthetic version, which the Wetiko cult would control in terms of production, and who eats and who doesn't. We have been on the totalitarian tiptoe to this for more than 60 years, as food has become ever more processed and full of chemical shite to the point today when it's not natural food at all. As Dr. Tom Cowan says, if it has a label, don't eat it. Bill Gates is now the biggest owner of farmland in the United States, and he does nothing without an ulterior motive involving the cult. Klaus Schwab wrote, "To feed the world in the next 50 years, we will need to produce as much food as was produced in the last 10,000 years. Food security will only be achieved, however, if regulations on genetically modified foods are adapted to wreak the reality that gene editing offers a precise, efficient, and safe method of improving crops." Liar. People in the world are being targeted with aluminium through vaccines, chemtrails, food, drink cans, and endless other sources when aluminium has been linked to many health issues including dementia, which is increasing year. Insects, bees, and wildlife essential to the food chain are being deleted by pesticides, herbicides, and radiation, which 5G is dramatically increasing with 6G and 7G to come. The pollinating bee population is being devastated, while wildlife including birds, dolphins, and whales are having their natural radar blocked by the eeks of ever-increasing radiation. In the summer, windscreens used to be splattered with insects, so numerous were they. It doesn't happen now. Where have they gone? Synthetic everything. The cult is introducing genetically modified versions of trees, plants, and insects, including a Gates-funded project to unleash hundreds of millions of genetically modified, lab-altered and patented male mosquitoes to mate with wild mosquitoes and induce genetic awes that cause them to die out. Clinically insane Gates-funded Japanese researchers have developed mosquitoes that spread vaccine and are dubbed Ying vaccinators. Gates is funding the modification of weather patterns, in part to sell the myth that this is caused by carbon dioxide, and he's funding geoengineering of the skies to change the atmosphere. Some of this came to light with the Gates-backed plan to release tons of chalk into the atmosphere to deek the sun and cool the planet. Funny how they do this, while the heating eked of the sun is not factored into climate projections focused on carbon dioxide. The reason is that they want to reduce carbon dioxide, so don't mention the sun. But at the same time, they do want to reduce the impact of the sun, which is so essential to human life and health. I have mentioned the sun cholesterol vitamin D connection, as they demonize the sun with warnings about skin cancer caused by the chemicals in sun cream they tell you to splash on. They come from the other end of the process, with statin drugs to reduce cholesterol that turns sunlight into vitamin D. A lack of vitamin D leads to a long list of health eeks, and how vitamin D levels must have fallen with people conned to their homes over COVID. Gates is funding other forms of geoengineering, and most importantly chemtrails, which are dropping heavy metals, aluminium, and self-replicating nanotechnology onto the Earth, which is killing the natural world. See everything you need to know, but have never been told for the detailed background to this. Every human system is being targeted for deletion by a force that's not human. The Wetiko cult has embarked on the process of transforming the human body from biological to synthetic biological, as I have explained. Biological is being replaced by the artificial and synthetic archontic countermimicry right across human society. The plan eventually is to dispense with the human body altogether and absorb human consciousness, which it wouldn't really be by then, into cyberspace, the simulation which is Wetiko Yaldabaoth. Preparations for that are already happening if people would care to look. The alternative meteor rightly warns about globalism and the globalists, but this is far bigger than that and represents the end of the human race as we know it. The bad copy of prime reality that Gnostics describe was a bad copy of harmony, wonder and beauty to start with before Wetiko Yaldabaoth set out to change the simulated copy into something very different. The process was slow to start with. Entrapped humans in the simulation timeline were not technologically aware, and they had to be brought up to intellectual speed while being suppressed spiritually to the point where they could build their own prison while having no idea they were doing so. We have now reached that stage where technological intellect has the potential to destroy us, and that's why events are moving so fast. Central American shaman Don Juan Matus said, "Think for a moment, and tell me how you would explain the contradictions between the intelligence of man the engineer and the stupidity of his systems of belief, or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. Sorcerers believe that the predators have given us our systems of beliefs, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. They are the ones who set up our dreams of success or failure. They have given us covetousness, greed, and cowardice. It is the predator who makes us complacent, routinary, and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient and meek and weak, the predators engaged themselves in a stupendous maneuver, stupendous, of course, from the point of view of a fighting strategist, a horrendous maneuver from the point of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory, morose, filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now. For predators see Wetiko, Archons, Yaldabaoth, Jinn, and all the other versions of the same phenomenon in cultures and religions all over the world. The theme is always the same because it's true and it's real. We have reached the point where we have to deal with it. The question is how. Don't fight, walk away. I thought I'd use a controversial subheading to get things moving in terms of our response to global fascism. What do you mean don't GHT? What do you mean walk away? We've got to GHT. We can't walk away. Well, it depends what we mean by GHT and walk away. If GHTing means physical combat, we are playing Wetiko's game and falling for its trap. It wants us to get angry, aggressive, and direct hate and hostility at the enemy. We think we must GHT. Every war, every bale, every connect has been fought with Wetiko leading both sides. It's what it does. Wetiko wants a GHT anywhere, any place. Just hit me, son, so I can hit you back. Wetiko hits Wetiko and Wetiko hits Wetiko in return. I am very forthright, as you can see, in exposing Wetikos of the cult, but I don't hate them. I refuse to hate them. It's what they want. What you hate you become. What you fight you become. Wokers, anti-haters and anti-fascists prove this every time they reach for their keyboards or don their balaclavas. By walk away I mean to disengage from Wetiko, which includes ceasing to cooperate with its tyranny. Paul Levy says of Wetiko, "The way to defeat evil is not to try to destroy it, for then, in playing evil's game, we have already lost, but rather to find the invulnerable place within ourselves where evil is unable to vanquish us. This is to truly win our battle with evil." Wetiko is everywhere in human society, and it's been on steroids since the COVID hoax. Every shouting match over wearing masks has Wetiko wearing a mask and Wetiko not wearing one. It's an electrical circuit of push and resist, with Wetiko pushing and resisting. Each polarity is Wetiko empowering itself. Dictionary definitions of resist include opposing, refusing to accept or comply with, and the word to focus on is opposing. What form does this take, saying police cars alight, or refusing to accept or comply with? The former is Wetiko, opposing Wetiko, while the other points the way forward. This is the difference between those aggressively demanding that government fascism must be obeyed, who stand in stark contrast to the great majority of pushbackers. We saw this clearly with a march by thousands of pushbackers against lockdown in London, followed days later by a woker hacked protest in Bristol, in which police cars were set on masks were virtually absent in London and widespread in Bristol. Wetiko wants lockdown on every level of society and infuses its aggression to police it through its unknowing stooges. Lockdown protesters are the ones with the smiling faces and the hugs. The two blatantly obvious states of being Jang more obvious by the day are the result of wokers, and they're, like becoming ever more nuanced, by the simulation field of Wetiko and pushbackers, ever more nuanced by the field, of a far higher vibration beyond the simulation. Wetiko can't invade the heart, which is where most lockdown opponents are coming from. It's the heart that allows them to see through the lies to the truth, in ways I will be highlighting. Renegade minds know that calmness is the place from which wisdom comes. You want ND wisdom in a hissing tea, and wisdom is what we need in abundance, right now. Calmness is not weakness. You don't have to scream at the top of your voice to be strong. Calmness is indeed a sign of strength. No means not doing it. Nu doesn't mean you're not doing it even more. Volume does not advance no not doing it. You are just not doing it. Wetiko possessed and nuanced don't know how to deal with that. Wetiko wants a GHT and we should not give it one. What it needs more than anything is our cooperation and we should not give that either. Mass rallies and marches are great in that they are a visual representation of feeling, but if it ends there they are irrelevant. You demand that Wetikos act differently. Well, they are not going to, are they? They are Wetikos. We don't need to waste our time demanding that something doesn't happen when that will make no difference. We need to delete the means that allows it to happen. This, invariably, is our cooperation. You can demand a child stop ring a pea shooter at the dog, or you can refuse to buy the pea shooter. If you provide the means, you are cooperating with the dog being smacked on the nose with a pea. How can the authorities enforce mask wearing if millions in a country refuse? What if the 74 million pushbackers that voted for Trump in 2020 refused to wear masks, close their businesses, or stay in their homes? It would be unenforceable. The few control the many through the compliance of the many, and that's always been the dynamic, be it COVID regulations or the Roman Empire. I know people can indeed intimidating to say no to authority or stand out in a crowd for being the only one with a face on display. But it has to be done or it's over. I hope I've made clear in this book that where this is going will be far more intimidating than standing up now and saying no, I will not cooperate with my own enslavement and that of my children. There might be consequences for some initially, although not so if enough do the same. The question that must be addressed is what is going to happen if we don't. It is time to be strong and unyieldingly so. No means no. Not here and there, but everywhere and always. I have refused to wear a mask and obey all the other nonsense. I will not comply with tyranny. I repeat, fascism is not imposed by fascists, there are never enough of them. Fascism is imposed by the population acquiescing to fascism. I will not do it. I will die RST or my body will. Living meekly under fascism is a form of death anyway, the death of the spirit that Martin Luther King described. Making things happen, we must not despair. This is not over till it's over, and it's far from that. The fat lady must refuse to sing. The longer the COVID hoax has dragged on and impacted on more lives, we have seen an awakening of phenomenal numbers of people, worldwide, to the realization that what they have believed all their lives is not how the world really is. Research published by the System-Serving University of Bristol and King's College London in February 2021 concluded, 1 in every 11 people in Britain say they trust David Icke's take on the coronavirus pandemic. It will be more by now, and we have gathering numbers to build on. We must urgently progress from seeing the scam to ceasing to cooperate with it. Prominent German lawyer Rainer Fuhlmich, also licensed to practice law in America, is doing a magnificent job taking the legal route to bring the psychopaths to justice through a second Nuremberg tribunal for crimes against humanity. Fuhlmich has an impressive record of beating the elite in court, and he formed the German Corona Investigative Committee to pursue civil charges against the main perpetrators with a view to triggering criminal charges. Most importantly, he has grasped the foundation of the hoax. The PCR test, not testing for the virus, and Christian Drosten, is therefore on his charge sheet, along with Gates frontman Tedros, at the World Health Organization. Major players must not be allowed to enact their horrors on the human race without being brought to book. A life sentence must follow for Bill Gates and the rest of them. A group of researchers has also indicted the government of Norway for crimes against humanity, with copies sent to the police and the International Criminal Court. The lawsuit cites participation in an internationally planned, false pandemic and violation of international law and human rights, the European Commission's definition of human rights by coercive rules, Nuremberg and Hague rules on fundamental human rights, and the Norwegian Constitution. We must take the initiative from here on, and not just complain, protest, and react. There are practical ways to support vital mass non-cooperation. Organizing in numbers is one. Lockdown marches in London in the spring in 2021 were mass non-cooperation that the authorities could not stop. There were too many people. Hundreds of thousands walked the London streets in the center of the road for mile while the face nappies could only look on. They were determined, but calm, and just did it with no histrionics and lots of smiles. The police were impotent. Others are organizing group shopping without masks for mutual support, and imagine, if that was happening all over. Policing it would be impossible. If the store refuses to serve people in these circumstances, they would be faced with a long line of trolleys full of goods standing on their own, and everything would have to be returned to the shelves. How would they cope with that if it kept happening? I am talking here about moving on from complaining to being proactive, from watching things happen to making things happen. I include in this our relationship with the police. The behavior of many face nappies has been disgraceful, and anyone who thinks they would never end concentration camp guards in the enlightened modern era have had that myth busted big time. The period and saying may change what tickos never do. I watched LM footage from a London march, in which a police thug viciously kicked a protester on the oar who had done nothing. His fellow face nappies stood in a ring protecting him. What he did was a criminal assault, and with a crowd far outnumbering the police, this can no longer be allowed to happen unchallenged. I get it when people chant shame on you in these circumstances, but that is no longer enough. They have no shame, those who do this. Crowds needs to start making a citizen's arrest of the police who commit criminal offences and brutally awk innocent people and defenseless women. A citizen's arrest can be made under Section 24A of the UK Police and Criminal Evidence (PACE) Act of 1984, and you will indeed something similar in other countries. I prefer to call it a common law arrest rather than citizens for reasons I will come to shortly. Anyone can arrest a person committing an indictable offence, or if they have reasonable grounds to suspect they are committing an indictable offence. On both counts, the awk by the police thug would have fallen into this category. A citizen's arrest can be made to stop someone causing physical injury to himself or any other person suing physical injury, causing loss of or damage to property making before a constable can assume responsibility for him. A citizen's arrest may also be made to prevent a breach of the peace under common law. And if they believe a breach of the peace will happen, or anything related to harm, likely to be done or already done in their presence. This is the way to go, I think, the common law version. If police know that the crowd and members of the public will no longer be standing and watching while they commit their thuggery and crimes, they will think twice about acting like brown shirts and black shirts. Common law common sense mention of common law is very important. Most people think the law is the law as in one law. This is not the case. There are two bodies of law, common law and statute law, and they are not the same. Common law is founded on the simple premise of do no harm. It does not recognize victimless crimes in which no harm is done, while statute law does. There's a statute law against almost everything. So what is statute law? Amazingly, it's the law of the sea that was brought ashore by the cult to override the law of the land, which is common law. They had no right to do this, and as always they did it anyway. They had to. They could not impose their will on the people through common law, which only applies to do no harm. How could you stitch up the neat detail of people's lives with that? Instead they took the law of the sea, or admiralty law, and applied it to the population. Statute law refers to all the laws spewing out of governments and their agencies, including all the fascist laws and regulations relating to COVID. The key point to make is that statute law is contract law. It only applies between contracting corporations. Most police officers don't even know this. They have to be kept in the dark, too. Long ago, when merchants and their sailing ships began to trade with different countries, a contractual law was developed called admiralty law and other names. Again, it only applied to contracts agreed between corporate entities. If there is no agreed contract, the law of the sea had no jurisdiction, and that still applies to its new alias of statute law. The problem for the cult, when the law of the sea was brought ashore, was an obvious one. People were not corporations, and neither were government entities. To overcome the lair, they made governments, and all associated organizations corporations. All the institutions are private corporations, and I mean governments and their agencies, local councils, police, courts, military, U.S. states, the whole lot. Go to the Dun & Bradstreet corporate listings website for confirmation that they are all corporations. You are arrested by a private corporation, called the police by someone who is really a private security guard, and they take you to court, which is another private corporation. Neither have jurisdiction over you, unless you consent and contract with them. This is why you hear the mantra about law enforcement policing by consent of the people. In truth, the people consent only in theory through monumental trickery. Okay, the cult overcame the corporate law problem by making governments and institutions corporate entities. But what about people? They are not corporations, are they? Ah, well, in a sense, and only a sense, they are. Not people, exactly the illusion of people. The cult creates a corporation in the name of everyone at the time that their birth certificate is issued. Note birth certificate. And when you go to court under the law of the sea on land, you stand in a dock. These are throwbacks to the origin. My common law name is David Icke. The name of the corporation created by the government when I was born is called Mr. David Icke, usually written in capitals as Mr. David Icke. That is not me, the living, breathing man. It is a fictitious corporate entity. The trick is to make you think that David Icke and Mr. David Icke are the same thing. They are not. When police charge you and take you to court, they are prosecuting the corporate entity, and not the living, breathing man or woman. They have to trick you into identifying as the corporate entity and contracting with them. Otherwise, they have no jurisdiction. They do this through a language known as legalese. Lawful and legal are not the same either. Lawful relates to common law and legal relates to statute law. Legalese is the language of statute law, which uses terms that mean one thing to the public and another in legalese. Notice that when a police officer tells someone why they are being charged, he or she will say at the end, "Do you understand?" To the public that means, "Do you comprehend?" In legalese it means, "Do you stand under me? Do you stand under my authority?" If you say yes to the question, you are unknowingly agreeing to give them jurisdiction over you in a contract between two corporate entities. This is a condensed trick in every way. Contracts have to be agreed between informed parties, and if you don't know that David Icke is agreeing to be the corporation Mr. David Icke, you cannot knowingly agree to contract. They are deceiving you, and another way they do this is to ask for proof of identity. You usually show them a driving license or other document on which your corporate name is written. In doing so, you are accepting that you are that corporate entity when you are not. Referring to yourself as a person or citizen is also identifying with your corporate citizen, which is why I made the common law point about the citizen's arrest. If you are approached by a police officer, you identify yourself immediately as a living, breathing man or woman and say, "I do not consent. I do not contract with you, and I do not understand or stand under their authority. I have a common law birth certificate as a living man, and these are available at no charge from common law court." Businesses registered under the statute law system means that its laws apply. There are, however, ways to run a business under common law. Remember, all COVID laws and regulations are statute law, the law of contracts, and you do not have to contract. This doesn't mean that you can kill someone and get away with it. Common law says do no harm, and that applies to physical harm, natural harm, etc. Police are employees of private corporations, and there needs to be a new system of non-corporate common law constables operating outside the statute law system. If you go to David Icke.com and put common law into the search engine, you will ND videos that explain common law in much greater detail. It is definitely a road we should walk. With all my heart, I have heard people say that we are in a spiritual war. I don't like the term war with its Wetiko dynamic, but I know what they mean. Sweep aside all the bodily forms, and we are in a situation in which two states of consciousness are seeking very different realities. Wetiko wants upheaval, chaos, fear, sewering, connect, and control. The other wants love, peace, harmony, fairness, and freedom. That's where we are. We should not fall for the idea that Wetiko is all-powerful and there's nothing we can do. Wetiko is not all-powerful. It's a joke, pathetic. It doesn't have to be, but it has made that choice for now. A handful of times over the years when I have felt the presence of its frequency, I have allowed it to ochbre so I could consciously observe its nature. The experience is not pleasant. The energy is heavy and dark, but the ease with which you can kick it back out the door shows that its real power is in persuading us that it has power. It's all a con. Wetiko is a con. It's a trickster and not a power that can control us if we unleash our own. The con is founded on manipulating humanity to give its power to Wetiko, which recycles it back to present the illusion that it has power when its power is ours that we gave away. This happens on an energetic level and plays out in the world of the scene as humanity giving its power to Wetiko authority, which uses that power to control the population when the power is only the power the population has handed over. How could it be any other way for billions to be controlled by a relative few? I have had experiences with people possessed by Wetiko, and again, you can kick its arse if you do it with an open heart. Oh yes, the heart which can transform the world of perceived matter. We are receiver transmitters and processors of information, but what information and where from? Information is processed into perception in three main areas: the brain, the heart, and the belly. These relate to thinking, knowing, and emotion. Wetiko wants us to be head and belly people, which means we think within the cons of the matrix simulation, and low vibrational emotional reaction scrambles balance and perception. A few minutes on social media, and you see how emotion is the dominant force. Woke is all emotion and is therefore thought-free and fact-free. Our heart is something different. It knows while the head thinks and has to try to work it out because it doesn't know. The human energy eld has 7 prime vortexes which connect us with wider reality. Fig 23. Chakra means wheels of light in the Sanskrit language of ancient India. The main ones are the crown chakra on top of the head, brow or third eye chakra in the center of the forehead, throat chakra, heart chakra in the center of the chest, solar plexus chakra below the sternum, sacral chakra beneath the navel, and base chakra at the boom of the spine. Each one has a particular function or functions. We feel anxiety and nervousness in the belly where the sacral chakra is located, and this processes emotion that can eke the colon to give people the shits, or make them shit scared when they are nervous. Chakras all play an important role, but the Mr. and Mrs. Big is the heart chakra which sits at the center of the 7, above the chakras that connect us to the physical, and below those that connect with higher realms, or at least should. Here in the heart chakra we feel love, empathy, and compassion. My heart goes out to you. Those with closed hearts become literally heartless in their attitudes and behavior. See Bill Gates. Native Americans portrayed Wetiko with what Paul Levy calls a frigid, icy heart, devoid of mercy. See Bill Gates. Figure 23. The chakra system which interpenetrates the human energy field. The heart chakra is the governor or should be. Wetiko trembles at the thought of heart energy which it cannot infiltrate. The frequency is too high. What it seeks to do instead is close the heart chakra vortex to block its perceptual and energetic influence. Psychopaths have hearts of stone, and emotionally damaged people have heartache and broken hearts. The astonishing amount of heart disease is related to heart chakra disruption with its fundamental connection to the physical heart. Dr. Tom Cowan has written an outstanding book challenging the belief that the heart is a pump and making the connection between the physical and spiritual heart. Rudolf Steiner, who was way ahead of his time, said the same about the fallacy that the heart is a pump. What? The heart is not a pump. That's crazy, right? Everybody knows that. Read Cowan's Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, and you will realize that the very idea of the heart as a pump is ridiculous when you see the evidence. How does blood in the feet so far from the heart get pumped horizontally up the body by the heart? Cowan explains in the book the real reason why blood moves as it does. Our physical heart is used to symbolize love, when the source is really the heart vortex, or spiritual heart, which is our most powerful energetic connection to out there expanded consciousness. That's why we feel knowing, intuitive knowing in the center of the chest. Knowing doesn't come from a process of thoughts leading to a conclusion. It is there in an instant, all in one go. Our heart knows because of its connection to levels of awareness that do know. This is the meaning and source of intuition, intuitive knowing. For the last more than 30 years of uncovering the global game and the nature of reality, my heart has been my constant antenna for truth and accuracy. An American intelligence insider once said that I had quoted a disinformer in one of my books, and yet I had only quoted the part that was true. He asked, "How do you do that?" "By using my heart antenna," was the answer, and anyone can do it. Heart-centered is how we are meant to be. With a closed heart chakra, we withdraw into a closed mind and the bubble of V-sense reality. If you take a moment to focus your attention on the center of your chest, picture a spinning wheel of light, and see it opening and expanding. You will feel it happening, too, and perceptions of the heart like joy and love, as the heart impacts on the mind as they interact. The more the chakra opens, the more you will feel expressions of heart consciousness, and as the process continues and becomes part of you, insights and knowings will follow. An open heart is connected to that level of awareness that knows all is one. You will see from its perspective that the fault lines that divide us are only illusions to control us. An open heart does not process the illusions of race, creed, and sexuality, except as brief experiences for a consciousness that is all. Our heart does not see division, only unity. Figs 24 and 25. There's something else too. Our hearts love to laugh. Mark Twain's quote that says the human race has one really effective weapon, and that is laughter, is really a reference to the heart, which loves to laugh with the joy of knowing the true nature of innate reality, and that all the madness of human society is an illusion of the mind. Twain also said, "Against the assault of laughter nothing can stand." This is so true of Wetiko and the cult. Their insecurity demands that they be taken seriously, and their power and authority acknowledged and feared. We should do nothing of the sort. We should not get aggressive or fearful, which their insecurity so desires. We should laugh in their face, even in their no-face, as police come over in their face napas, and expect to be taken seriously. They don't take themselves seriously looking like that, so why should we? Laugh in the face of intimidation. Laugh in the face of tyranny. You will see by its reaction that you have pressed all of its buons. Wetiko does not know what to do in the face of laughter, or when its targets refuse to concede their joy to fear. We have seen many examples during the COVID hoax, when people have expressed their energetic power, and the string puppets of Wetiko retreat with their tail limp between their knees. Laugh, the world is bloody mad ere all, and if it's a choice between laughter and tears, I know which way I'm going. Figure 24. Head consciousness without the heart sees division and everything apart from everything else. Figure 25. Heart consciousness sees everything as one. Vaccines and the soul. The foundation of Wetiko Archon control of humans is the separation of incarnate V-sense mind from the innate I and closing the heart chakra, where the true I lives during a human life. The goal has been to achieve complete separation in both cases. I was interested, therefore, to read an account by a French energetic healer of what she said she experienced with a patient who had been given the COVID vaccine. Genuine energy healers can sense information and consciousness elds at different levels of being, which are referred to as subtle bodies. She described treating the patient who later returned air, having, without the healer's knowledge, 2 doses of the COVID vaccine. The healer said, "I noticed immediately the change, very heavy energy, emanating from the subtle bodies. The scariest thing was when I was working on the heart chakra, I connected with her soul. It was detached from the physical body, it had no contact, and it was, as if it was floating in a state of total confusion. A damage to the consciousness that loses contact with the physical body, i.e., with our biological machine, there is no longer any communication between them. I continued the treatment by sending light to the heart chakra, the soul of the person, but it seemed that the soul could no longer receive any light, frequency, or energy. It was a very powerful experience for me. Then I understood that this substance is indeed used to detach consciousness, so that this consciousness can no longer interact through this body that it possesses in life, where there is no longer any contact, no frequency, no light, no more energetic balance or mind. This would create a human that is rudderless, and at the extreme almost zombie-like, operating with a fractional state of consciousness at the mercy of Wetiko. I was especially intrigued by what the healer said in the light of the prediction by the highly informed Rudolf Steiner more than 100 years ago. He said, "In the future, we will eliminate the soul with medicine. Under the pretext of a healthy point of view, there will be a vaccine by which the human body will be treated as soon as possible directly at birth, so that the human being cannot develop the thought of the existence of soul and spirit. To materialistic doctors will be entrusted the task of removing the soul of humanity. As today, people are vaccinated against this disease or that disease, so in the future, children will be vaccinated with a substance that can be produced precisely in such a way that people, thanks to this vaccination, will be immune to being subjected to the madness of spiritual life. He would be extremely smart, but he would not develop a conscience, and that is the true goal of some materialistic circles." Steiner said the vaccine would detach the physical body from the etheric body, subtle bodies. And once the etheric body is detached, the relationship between the universe and the etheric body would become extremely unstable, and man would become an automaton. He said the physical body of man must be polished on this earth by spiritual will, so the vaccine becomes a kind of aramanique, Wetiko. Force and man can no longer get rid of a given materialistic feeling. Humans would then, he said, become materialistic of constitution, and can no longer rise to the spiritual. I have been writing for years about DNA being a receiver-transmitter of information that connects us to other levels of reality, and these vaccines changing DNA can be likened to changing an antenna and what it can transmit and receive. Such a disconnection would clearly lead to changes in personality and perception. Steiner further predicted the arrival of AI. Big Pharma COVID vaccine makers, expressions of Wetiko, are testing their DNA manipulating evil on children, as I write with a view to giving the vaccine to babies. If it's a soul-body disconnector, And I say that it is, or can be every child would be disconnected from soul at birth, and the vaccine would create a closed system in which spiritual guidance from the greater self would play no part. This has been the ambition of Wetiko all along. A Pentagon video from 2005 was leaked of a presentation explaining the development of vaccines to change behavior by their Icke on the brain. Those that believe this is not happening with the COVID genetically modifying procedure, masquerading as a vaccine should make an urgent appointment with Naivety Anonymous. Klaus Schwab wrote in 2018, "Neurotechnologies enable us to better influence consciousness and thought, and to understand many activities of the brain. They include decoding what we are thinking in fine levels of detail through new chemicals and interventions that can influence our brains to correct for errors or enhance functionality. The plan is clear, and only the heart can stop it. With every heart that opens, every mind that awakens, Wetiko is weakened. Heart and love are far more powerful than head and hate, and so nothing like a majority is needed to turn this around. Beyond the phantom, our heart is the prime target of Wetiko, and so it must be the answer to Wetiko. We are our heart, which is part of one heart, the innate heart. Our heart is where the true self lives in a human life behind walls of V-sense illusion, when an imposter takes its place phantom self. But our heart waits patiently to be set free anytime we choose to see beyond the phantom, beyond Wetiko. A Wetikoed phantom self can wreak mass death and destruction, while the love of forever is locked away in its heart. The time is here to unleash its power, and let it sweep away the fear and despair that is Wetiko. Heart consciousness does not seek manipulated, censored, advantage for its belief or religion, its activism and desires. As an expression of the one, it treats all as one with the same rights to freedom and opinion. Our heart demands fairness for itself no more than for others. From this unity of heart, we can come together in mutual support and transform this Wetikoed world into what reality is meant to be, a place of love, joy, happiness, fairness, justice, and freedom. Wetiko has another agenda, and that's why the world is as it is. But enough of this nonsense. Wetiko can't stay where hearts are open, and it works so hard to keep them closed. Fear is its currency and its food source, and love in its true sense has no fear. Why would love have fear when it knows it is all that is, has been, and ever can be on an eternal exploration of all possibility? Love in this true sense is not the physical interaction that passes for love. This can be an expression of it, yes, but innate love. A love without condition goes far deeper to the core of all being. It is the core of all being. Innate reality was born from love beyond the illusions of the simulation. Love innately expressed is the knowing that all is one, and the slyly passing experience of separation is a temporary hallucination. You cannot disconnect from oneness. You can only perceive that you have and withdraw from its nuance. This is the most important of all perception trickery by the mind parasite that is Wetiko, and the foundation of all its potential for manipulation. If we open our hearts, open the sluice gates of the mind, and redeem self-identity, amazing things start to happen. Consciousness expands or contracts in accordance with self-identity. When true self is recognized as innate awareness and label self, phantom self is seen as only a series of brief experiences, life is transformed. Consciousness expands to the extent that self-identity expands and everything changes. You see unity, not division, the picture, not the pixels. From this we can play the long game. No more is an experience something in and of itself, but a eating moment in the eternity of forever. Suddenly people in uniform and dark suits are no longer intimidating. Doing what your heart knows to be right is no longer intimidating, and consequences for those actions take on the same nature of a brief experience that passes in the blink of an innate eye. Intimidation is all in the mind. Beyond the mind there is no intimidation. An open heart does not consider consequences for what it knows to be right. To do so would be to consider not doing what it knows to be right, and for a heart in its power that is never an option. The renegade mind is really the renegade heart. Consideration of consequences will always provide a getaway car for the mind, and the heart doesn't want one. What is right in the light of what we face today is to stop cooperating with Wetiko in all its forms, and to do it without fear or compromise. You cannot compromise with tyranny when tyranny always demands more until it has everything. Life is your perception and you are your destiny. Change your perception and you change your life. Change collective perception and we change the world. Come on people, one human family, one heart. One goal, free Edom, we must seal for nothing less. T postscript, he big scare story as the book goes to press, is the Indian variant, and the world is being deluged with propaganda about the COVID catastrophe in India, which mirrors in its lies and misrepresentations what happened in Italy before the RSD lockdown in 2020. The New York Post published a picture of someone who had collapsed in the street from COVID in India in April 2021, which was actually taken during a gas leak in May 2020. Same old, same old. Media articles in mid-February were asking why India had been so untouched by COVID, and then as their vaccine rollout gathered pace, the alleged cases began to rapidly increase. Indian COVID vaccine maker Bharat Biotech was funded into existence by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The pair announced their divorce in May 2021, which is a pity because they so deserve each other. The Indian COVID crisis was ramped up by the media to terrify the world and prepare people for submission to still more restrictions. The scam that worked the RSD time was being repeated only with far more people seeing through the deceit. David Icke, calm and iconic. Calm have sought to tell the true story of what is happening by talking to people living through the Indian nightmare, which has nothing to do with COVID. We posted a leer from Alicia in Pune, who told a very different story to government and media mendacity. She said scenes of dying people and overwhelmed hospitals were designed to hide what was really happening: genocide and starvation. Alicia said that millions had already died of starvation during the ongoing lockdowns, while government and media were lying and making it look like the virus. Restaurants, shops, gyms, theaters, basically everything is shut. The cities are ghost towns. Even so-called essential businesses are only open till 11 a.m. in the morning. You basically have just an hour to buy food and then your time is up. Interstate travel and even interdistrict travel is banned. The cops wait at all major crossroads to question why you are traveling outdoors or to fine you if you are not wearing a mask. The medical community here is also complicit in genocide, lying about hospitals being full and turning away people with genuine illnesses who need immediate care. They have even created a shortage of oxygen cylinders. This is the classic cult modus operandi played out in every country. Alicia said that people who would not have a PCR test, not testing for the virus, were being denied hospital treatment. She said the people hit hardest were migrant workers, and those in rural areas. Most businesses employed migrant workers, and with everything closed, there were no jobs, no income and no food. As a result, millions were dying of starvation or malnutrition. All this was happening under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a 100% asset of the cult, and it emphasizes yet again the scale of pure anti-human evil we are dealing with. Australia banned its people from returning home from India, with penalties for trying to do so of up to 5 years in jail, and a knee of 37,000. The manufactured COVID crisis in India was being prepared to justify further fascism in the West. Obvious connections could be seen between the Indian vaccine program and increased cases, and this became a common theme. The Seychelles, the most per capita COVID-vaccinated population in the world, went back into lockdown ere a surge of cases. Long ago, the truly evil Monsanto Agricultural Biotechnology Corporation, with its big connections to Bill Gates, devastated Indian farming with genetically modified crops. Human rights activist Gurcharan Singh highlighted the efforts by the Indian government to complete the job by destroying the food supply to hundreds of millions with COVID lockdowns. He said that 415 million people, at the boom of the disgusting caste system, still going whatever they say were below the poverty line, and struggled to feed themselves every year. Now the government was imposing lockdown at just the time to destroy the harvest. This deliberate policy was leading to mass starvation. People may reel back at the suggestion that a government would do that, but Wetiko-controlled leaders are capable of any level of evil. In fact, what is described in India is in the process of being instigated worldwide. The food chain and food supply are being targeted at every level to cause world hunger and thus control. Bill Gates is not the biggest owner of farmland in America, for no reason, and destroying access to food aids, both the depopulation agenda and the plan for synthetic food already being funded into existence by Gates. Add to this the coming hyperination from the suicidal creation of fake money in response to COVID and the breakdown of container shipping systems, and you have a cocktail that can only lead one way and is meant to. The cult plan is to crash the entire system to build back better with the Great Reset. Vaccine transmission reports from all over the world continue to emerge of women suffering menstrual and fertility problems ere having the fake vaccine, and of the non-vaccinated having similar problems when interacting with the vaccinated. There are far too many for coincidence to be credible. We've had menopausal women jang periods, others having periods stop or not stopping for weeks, passing clots, sometimes the lining of the uterus, breast irregularities, and miscarriages, which increased by 400% in parts of the United States. Non-vaccinated men and children have sewered blood clots and nose-bleeding air interaction with the vaccinated. Babies have died from the eeks of breast milk from a vaccinated mother. Awake doctors, the small minority speculated on the cause of non-vaccinated sewering the same eeks as the vaccinated. Was it nanotechnology in the synthetic substance transmitting frequencies, or was it a straight chemical bioweapon that was being transmitted between people? I am not saying that some kind of chemical transmission is not one possible answer, but the foundation of all that the cult does is frequency, and this is fertile ground for understanding how transmission can happen. American Dr. Carrie Maidage, an internal medicine physician and osteopath, has been practicing for the last 20 years, teaching medical students, and she says ending different meetings where the agenda for humanity was discussed. Maidage, who operates out of Georgia, did not dismiss other possible forms of transmission, but she focused on frequency in search of an explanation for transmission. She said the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines contained nanolipid particles as a key component. This was a brand new technology, never before used on humanity. They are using a nanotechnology, which is pretty much like tiny computer bits nanobots or hydrogel. Inside the vaccines was this psi kind of substance, which suppressed immune checkpoints to get into the cell. I referred to this earlier as the Trojan horse technique that tricks the cell into opening a gateway for the self-replicating synthetic material, and while the immune system is artificially suppressed, the body has no defenses. Maidage said the substance served many purposes including an on-demand ability to deliver the payload and using the nano-computer bits as biosensors in the body. It actually has the ability to accumulate data from your body, like your breathing, your respiration, thoughts, emotions, all kinds of things. She said the technology obviously has the ability to operate through Wi-Fi and transmit and receive energy, messages, frequencies, or impulses. Just imagine you're jang this new substance in you, and it can react to things all around you, the 5G, your smart device, your phones. We had something completely foreign in the human body that had never been launched large-scale at a time when we were seeing 5G going into schools and hospitals, plus the Musk satellites, and she believed the vaccine transmission had something to do with this. If these people have this inside of them, it can act like an antenna and actually transmit it outwardly as well. The synthetic substance produced its own voltage, and so it could have that kind of eked. This TS with my own contention that the nano receiver transmitters are designed to connect people to the smart grid and break the receiver transmitter connection to expanded consciousness. That would explain the French energy healer's experience of the disconnection of body from soul with those who have had the vaccine. The nanobots, self-replicating inside the body, would also transmit the synthetic frequency, which could be picked up through close interaction by those who have not been vaccinated. Maidage speculated that perhaps it was 5G and increased levels of other radiation that was causing the symptoms directly. Although, interestingly, she said that non-vaccinated patients had shown improvement when they were away from the vaccinated person they had interacted with. It must be remembered that you can control frequency and energy with your mind, and you can consciously create energetic barriers or bubbles with the mind to stop damaging frequencies from penetrating your eld. American pediatrician Dr. Larry Palevsky said the vaccine was not a vaccine and was never designed to protect from a viral infection. He called it a massive, brilliant propaganda of genocide because they didn't have to inject everyone to get the result they wanted. He said the content of the jabs was able to infuse any material into the brain, heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, sperm, and female productive system. This is genocide. This is a weapon of mass destruction. At the same time, American colleges were banning students from eating if they didn't have this life-changing and potentially life-ending vaccine. Class action lawsuits must follow when the consequences of this college fascism come to light. As the book was going to press, came reports about fertility eeks on sperm in vaccinated men, which would absolutely tee with what I have been saying, and hospitals continued to LL with vaccine reactions. Another question is what about transmission via blood transfusions? The NHS has extended blood donation restrictions from 7 days a COVID vaccination to 28 days even a sore arm reaction. I said in the spring of 2020 that the then-touted COVID vaccine would be ongoing each year like the U-jab. A year later, Pfizer CEO, the appalling Albert Bourla, said people would likely need a booster dose of the vaccine within 12 months of Jang fully vaccinated and then a yearly shot. Variants will play a key role, he said, condoming the point. Johnson & Johnson's CEO Alex Gorsky also took time out from his vaccine disaster to say that people may need to be vaccinated against COVID-19 each year. UK Health Secretary, the psychopath Ma Hancock, said additional boosters would be available in the autumn of 2021. This is the trap of the vaccine passport. The public will have to accept every last vaccine they introduce, including for the fake variants, or it would cease to be valid. The only other way in some cases would be continuous testing, with a test not testing for the virus, and what is on the swabs constantly pushed up your nose towards the brain every time. Vaccines changing behavior. I mentioned in the body of the book how I believed we would see gathering behavior changes in the vaccinated, and I am already hearing such comments from the non-vaccinated describing behavior changes in friends, loved ones, and work colleagues. This will only increase as the self-replicating synthetic material and nanoparticles expand in body and brain. An article in The Guardian in 2016 detailed research at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, which developed a new method for controlling brain circuits associated with complex animal behavior. The method, dubbed magnetogenetics, involves genetically engineering a protein called ferritin, which stores and releases iron, to create a magnetized substance magneto that can activate specific groups of nerve cells from a distance. This is claimed to be an advance on other methods of brain activity manipulation known as optogenetics and chemogenetics. The cult has been developing methods of brain control for a long time. The ferritin technique is said to be non-invasive and able to activate neurons rapidly and reversibly. In other words, human thought and perception. The article said that earlier studies revealed how nerve cell proteins activated by heat and mechanical pressure can be genetically engineered so that they become sensitive to radio waves and magnetic ELDs by attaching them to an iron-storing protein called ferritin or to inorganic paramagnetic particles. Sensitive to radio waves and magnetic ELDs, you mean like 5G, 6G, and 7G. This is the human AI smart grid hive mind we are talking about. The Guardian article said, the researchers injected magneto into the striatum of freely behaving mice, a deep brain structure containing dopamine-producing neurons that are involved in reward and motivation, and then placed the animals into an apparatus split into magnetized and non-magnetized sections. Mice expressing magneto spent far more time in the magnetized areas than mice that did not, because activation of the protein caused the striatal neurons expressing it to release dopamine, so that the mice found being in those areas rewarding. This shows that magneto can remotely control the firing of neurons deep within the brain, and also control complex behaviors. Make no mistake, this basic methodology will be part of the COVID vaccine cocktail, and using magnetics to change brain function through electromagnetic ELD frequency activation. The Pentagon is developing a COVID vaccine using ferritin. Magnetics would explain changes in behavior and why videos are appearing across the internet, as I write, showing how magnets stick to the skin at the point of the vaccine shot. Once people take these vaccines, anything becomes possible in terms of brain function and illness, which will be blamed on COVID-19 and variants. Magnetic ELD manipulation would further explain why the non-vaccinated are reporting the same symptoms as the vaccinated they interact with, and why those symptoms are reported to decrease when not in their company. Interestingly, Magneto, a mutant, is a character in the Marvel comic X-Men stories with the ability to manipulate magnetic ELDs, and he believes that mutants should GHT back against their human oppressors by any means necessary. The character was born Eric Laneshare to a Jewish family in Germany. Cult-controlled courts, the European Court of Human Rights, opened the door for mandatory COVID-19 vaccines across the continent when it ruled in a Czech Republic dispute over childhood immunization that legally enforced vaccination could be necessary in a democratic society. The 17 judges decided that compulsory vaccinations did not breach human rights law. On the face of it, the judgment was so inverted you gasp for air. If not having a vaccine infused into your body is not a human right, then what is? Ah, but they said human rights law, which has been specifically written to delete all human rights at the behest of the state, the cult. Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights relates to the right to a private life. The crucial word here is except. There shall be no interference by a public authority with the exercise of this right, except such as is in accordance with the law, and is necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. My emphasis. No interference, except in accordance with the law means there are no human rights, except what EU governments decide you can have at their behest. As is necessary in a democratic society, explains that reference in the judgment, and in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others, gives the EU a coach and horses to ride through human rights, and scare them in all directions. The judiciary is not a check and balance on government extremism, it is a vehicle to enforce it. This judgment was almost laughably predictable, when the last thing the cult wanted was a decision that went against mandatory vaccination. Judges rule over and over again, to bend the system of which they are a part. Vaccination disputes that come before them are invariably delivered in favor of doctors and authorities representing the view of the state which owns the judiciary. Oh, yes, and we have even had calls to stop pewing COVID-19 on death certificates within 28 days of a positive test, because it is claimed the practice makes the vaccine appear not to work. They are laughing at you. The scale of madness, inhumanity and things to come, was highlighted when those not vaccinated for COVID were refused evacuation from the Caribbean island of St. Vincent during massive volcanic eruptions. Cruise ships taking residents to the safety of another island allowed only the vaccinated to board, and the rest were led to their fate. Even in life and death situations like this, we see COVID stripping people of their most basic human instincts. And the insanity is even more extreme when you think that fake vaccine makers are not even claiming their body-manipulating concoctions stop infection and transmission of a virus that doesn't exist. St. Vincent Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves said, "The chief medical officer will be identifying the persons already vaccinated so that we can get them on the ship." Note again the power of the chief medical officer who, like we in the UK, will be answering to the World Health Organization. This is the cult network structure that has overridden politicians who follow the science, which means doing what WHO-controlled medical officers and science advisors tell them. Gonsalves even said that residents who were vaccinated ere the order so they could board the ships would still be refused entry due to possible side effects such as wooziness in the head. The good news is that if they were woozy enough in the head, they could qualify to be Prime Minister of St. Vincent. Microchipping freedom, the European judgment, will be used at some point to justify moves to enforce the COVID DNA manipulating procedure. Sandra Rowe, CEO of the Global Blockchain Business Council, told a World Economic Forum event that she hoped vaccine passports would help to drive forced consent and standardization of global digital identity schemes. I'm hoping with the desire and global demand for some sort of vaccine passport, so that people can get traveling and working again, it will drive forced consent, standardization, and frankly, cooperation across the world. The lady is either not very bright, or thoroughly mendacious, to use the term forced consent. You do not consent if you are forced, you submit. She was describing what the plan has been all along, and that's to enforce a digital identity on every human, without which they could not function. Vaccine passports are opening the door, and are far from the end goal. A digital identity would allow you to be tracked in everything you do in cyberspace, and this is the same technique used by cult-owned China to enforce its social credit system of total control. The ultimate passport is planned to be a microchip, as my books have warned for nearly 30 years. Those nice people at the Pentagon working for the cult-controlled Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, claimed in April 2021 they have developed a microchip inserted under the skin to detect asymptomatic COVID-19 infection before it becomes an outbreak, and a revolutionary L-TER that can remove the virus from the blood when attached to a dialysis machine. The only problems with this are that the virus does not exist, and people transmitting the virus with no symptoms is brain-numbing bullshit. This is, of course, not a ruse to get people to be microchipped for very different reasons. DARPA also said it was producing a one-stop vaccine for the virus and all variants. One of the most sinister organizations on planet Earth is doing this. Beer have it then. These people are insane because Wetiko that possesses them is insane. Researchers from the Salk Institute in California announced they have created an embryo that is part human and part monkey. My books going back to the 1990s have exposed experiments in top-secret underground facilities in the United States where humans are being crossed with animal and non-human extraterrestrial species. They are now easing that long-developed capability into the public arena, and there is much more to come given we are dealing with psychiatric basket cases. Talking of which, Elon Musk's scientists at Neuralink trained a monkey to play Pong and other puzzles on a computer screen using a joystick, and when the monkey made the correct move, a metal tube squirted banana smoothie into his mouth, which is the basic technique for training humans into unquestioning compliance. 2 Neuralink chips were in the monkey's skull, and more than 2,000 wires fanned out into its brain. Eventually the monkey played a video game purely with its brain waves. Psychopathic narcissist Musk said the breakthrough was a step towards pewing Neuralink chips into human skulls and merging minds with artificial intelligence. Exactly. This man is so dark and cult to his DNA. World Economic Fascism. WEF, the World Economic Forum is telling you the plan by the statements made at its many and various events. Cult-owned fascist YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki spoke at the 2021 WEF Global Technology Governance Summit, see the name, in which 40 governments and 150 companies met to ensure the responsible design and deployment of emerging technologies. Orwellian translation. Ensuring the design and deployment of long-planned technologies will advance the cult agenda for control and censorship. Freedom Destroyer and Nuremberg-bound Wojcicki expressed support for tech platforms like hers to censor content that is technically legal but could be harmful. Who decides what is harmful? She does, and they do. Harmful will be whatever the cult doesn't want people to see, and we have legislation proposed by the UK government that would censor content on the basis of harm, no matter if the information is fair, legal, and provably true. Make that especially if it is fair, legal, and provably true. Wojcicki called for a global coalition to be formed to enforce content moderation standards through automated censorship. This is a woman and mega-censor so self-deluded that she shamelessly accepted a Free Expression Award Wojcicki in an event sponsored by her own YouTube. They have no shame and no self-awareness. You know that COVID is a scam, and Wojcicki a cult operative when YouTube is censoring medical and scientific opinion, purely on the grounds of whether it supports or opposes the cult COVID narrative. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis compiled an expert panel with 4 professors of medicine from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford universities, who spoke against forcing children and vaccinated people to wear masks. They also said there was no proof that lockdowns reduced spread or death rates of COVID-19. Cult gopher Wojcicki and her YouTube deleted the panel video because it included content that contradicts the consensus of local and global health authorities regarding the efficacy of masks to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This consensus refers to what the cult tells the World Health Organization to say and the WHO tells local health authorities to do. Wojcicki knows this, of course. The panelists pointed out that censorship of scientific debate was responsible for deaths from many causes, but Wojcicki couldn't care less. She would not dare go against what she is told, and as a disgrace to humanity, she wouldn't want to anyway. The UK government is seeking to pass a fascist online safety bill to specifically target with massiveness and other means non-censored video and social media platforms to make them censor lawful but harmful content like the cult-owned Facebook, Twitter, Google, and YouTube. What is lawful but harmful would be decided by the fascist Blair-created Ofcom. Another WEF obsession is a cyberrock on the financial system, and this is clearly what the cult has planned to take down the bank accounts of everyone except theirs. Those that think they have enough money for the cult agenda not to matter to them have got a big lesson coming if they continue to ignore what is staring them in the face. The World Economic Forum, funded by Gates and fronted by Klaus Schwab, announced it would be running a simulation with the Russian government and global banks of just such an OC called Cyber Polygon 2021. What they simulate, as with the COVID event 201, they plan to instigate. The WEF is involved in a project with the cult-owned Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, called the WEF Carnegie Cyber Policy Initiative, which seeks to merge Wall Street banks, regulators, I love it, and intelligence agencies to prevent, arrange, and allow. A cyberrock that would bring down the global financial system, as long planned by those that control the WEF and the Carnegie Operation. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace sent an instruction to First World War U.S. President Woodrow Wilson not to let the war end before society had been irreversibly transformed. The Wuhan lab diversion. As I close, the cult-controlled authorities and lapdog media are systematically pushing the virus was released from the Wuhan lab narrative. There are two versions: it happened by accident, and it happened on purpose. Both are nonsense. The perceived existence of the never-shown-to-exist virus is vital to sell the impression that there is actually an infective agent to deal with, and to allow the endless potential for terrifying the population with variants of a virus that does not exist. The authorities at the time of writing are going with the by accident, while the alternative media is promoting the on purpose. Cable news host Tucker Carlson, who has questioned aspects of lockdown and vaccine compulsion, has bought the Wuhan lab story. Everyone now agrees, he said. Well, I don't, and many others don't, and the question is, why does the system and its media suddenly agree? When the media moves as one unit with a narrative, it is always a lie. Witness the hour-by-hour mendacity of the COVID era. Why would this cult-owned combination, which has unleashed lies like machine gun, suddenly agree to tell the truth? Much of the alternative media is buying the lie because it tests the conspiracy narrative, but it's the wrong conspiracy. Real conspiracy is that there is no virus, and that is what the cult is desperate to hide. The idea that the virus was released by accident is ludicrous, when the whole COVID hoax was clearly long planned and waiting to be played out, as it was so fast in accordance with the Rockefeller document and Event 201. So they prepared everything in detail over decades, and then sat around strumming their ingers waiting for an accidental release from a biolab. What? It's crazy. Then there's the on-purpose claim. You want to circulate a deadly virus, and hide the fact that you've done so, and you release it down the street from the highest-level biolab in China. I repeat, what? You would release it far from that lab to stop any association being made. But no, well, do it in a place where the connection was certain to be made. Why would you need to scam cases and deaths, and pay hospitals to diagnose COVID-19 if you had a real virus? What are sections of the alternative media doing believing this crap? Where were all the mass deaths in Wuhan from a deadly pathogen, when the recovery to normal life ere the initial propaganda was dramatic in speed? Why isn't the deadly pathogen now circulating all over China with bodies in the street? Once again, we have the technique of tell them what they want to hear, and they will likely believe it. The alternative media has its conspiracy, and with Carlson, it TS with his China, is the danger narrative over years. China is a danger as a global cult operations center, but not for this reason. The Wuhan lab story also has the potential to instigate connect with China, when at some stage the plan is to trigger a problem-reaction-solution confrontation with the West. Question everything, and especially when the media agrees on a common party line. Third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave. As the book went into production, the world was being set up for more lockdowns, and a third wave supported by invented variants that were increasing all the time, and will continue to do so in public statements and computer programs, but not in reality. India became the new Italy in the COVID propaganda campaign, and we were told to be frightened of the new Indian strain. Somehow I couldn't endure it within myself to do so. A document produced for the UK government, entitled Summary of Further Modelling of Easing of Restrictions, Roadmap Step 2, declared that a third wave was inevitable, of course when it's in the script. And it would be the fault of children, and those who refused the health-destroying fake COVID vaccine. One of the computer models involved came from the cult-owned Imperial College, and the other from Warwick University, which I wouldn't trust to tell me the date in a calendar factory. The document states that both models presumed extremely high uptake of the COVID vaccines and didn't allow for variants. The document states, the resurgence is a result of some people, mostly children, being ineligible for vaccination, others choosing not to receive the vaccine, and others being vaccinated but not perfectly protected. The mendacity takes the breath away. Okay, blame those with a brain who want take the DNA-modifying shots, and put more pressure on children to have it, as trials were underway involving children as young as 6 months with parents who give insanity a bad name. Massive pressure is being put on the young to have the fake vaccine, and child age consent limits have been systematically lowered around the world to stop parents intervening. Most extraordinary about the document was its claim that the third wave would be driven by the resurgence in both hospitalizations and deaths dominated by those that have received 2 doses of the vaccine, comprising around 60 to 70 of the wave respectively. The predicted peak of the third wave suggested 300 deaths per day, with 250 of them fully vaccinated people. How many more lies do acquiescers need to be told before they see the obvious? Those who took the jab to protect themselves are projected to be those who mostly get sick and die. So what's in the vaccine? The document went on. It is possible that a summer of low prevalence could be followed by substantial increases in incidence over the following autumn and winter. Low prevalence in late summer should not be taken as an indication that SARS-CoV-2 has retreated or that the population has high enough levels of immunity to prevent another wave. They are telling you the script, and while many British people believed COVID restrictions would end in the summer of 2021, the government was preparing for them to be ongoing. Authorities were awarding contracts for COVID marshals to police the restrictions, with contracts starting in July 2021 and going through to January 31st, 2022, and the government was advertising for media buying services to secure media propaganda slots worth a potential $320 million for COVID-19 campaigns, with a contract not ending until March 2022. The recipient, via a list of other front companies, was reported to be American media marketing giant Omnicom Group, Inc. While money is no object for COVID, the UK waiting list for all other treatment, including life-threatening conditions, past $4.5 million. Meantime, the cult is seeking to control all official inquiries to block revelations about what has really been happening and why. It must not be allowed to. We need Nuremberg jury trials in every country. The cover-up doesn't get more obvious than appointing ultra-Zionist Professor Philip Zelikow to oversee 24 U.S. virologists, public health officials, clinicians, former government officials, and 4 American charitable foundations to learn the lessons of the COVID debacle. The personnel will be those that created and perpetuated the COVID lies, while Zelikow is the former executive director of the 9/11 Commission, who ensured that the truth about those ox never came out, and produced a report that must be among the most mendacious and manipulative documents ever see the trigger for the detailed exposure of the almost unimaginable 9/11 story, in which Sebastians can be found at every level. Passive no more people are increasingly challenging the authorities, with amazing numbers of people taking to the streets in London, well beyond the ability of the face nappers to stop them. Instead, the nappers choose situations away from the mass crowds to target, intimidate, and seek to promote the impression of violent protesters. One such incident happened in London's Hyde Park. Hundreds of thousands walking through the streets in protest against COVID fascism were ignored by the cult-owned BBC and most of the rest of the mainstream media, but they delighted in reporting how police were injured in clashes with protesters. The truth was that a group of people gathered in Hyde Park at the end of one march, when most had gone home, and they were peacefully having a good time with music and chat. Face nappies who couldn't deal with the full march crowd then waded in with their batons and got more than they bargained for. Instead of just standing for this criminal brutality, the crowd used their numerical superiority to push the face nappies out of the park. Eventually the nappies turned and ran. Unfortunately, 2 or 3 idiots in the crowd threw drink cans, striking 2 officers, which gave the media and the government the image they wanted to discredit the 99% who were peaceful. The idiots walked straight into the trap, and we must always be aware of potential agent provocateurs used by the authorities to discredit their targets. This response from the crowd that can people apart must be a turning point when the public no longer stand by while the innocent are arrested and brutally ocked by the face nappies. That doesn't mean to be violent. That's the last thing we need. Well, leave the violence to the face nappies and government. But it does mean that, when the face nappies use violence against peaceful people, the numerical superiority is employed to stop them and make citizens' arrests or common law arrests for a breach of the peace. The time for being passive in the face of fascism is over. We are the many, they are the few, and we need to make that count before there is no freedom and our children and grandchildren face an ongoing fascist nightmare. Come on, people, it's time. One final thought: the power of love, a force from above cleaning my soul, flame on burn desire, Love with tongues of repurge, the soul make love your goal. Ill protect you from the hooded claw, keep the vampires from your door. When the chips are down, ill be around with my undying. Death-defying love for you envy, will hurt itself, let yourself be beautiful sparkling love. Owers and pearls and prey girls, love is like an energy Russian inside of me. This time we go sublime lovers entwine, divine, divine. Love is danger. Love is pleasure, love is pure, the only treasure. So in love with you purge the soul, make love your goal, the power of love, a force, from above cleaning, my soul, the power of love, a force, from above a skyscraping dove. Flame on burn desire, love with tongues of repurge, the soul make love your goal. Frankie goes to Hollywood.